Good evening, guys, and welcome out to Revolution. We're going to look at this video by, what was her name? Melissa Dougherty. And so I don't really know much about her. I might have watched a video or two over the years, but I can't really recall them. I think there was another video that she had done on Bible versions that goes for about 15 minutes. And so when I listened through this, I really sort of felt that this is the typical type of reasoning that you will get when you join a church and you go in there for a while and they're like, oh, why are you reading the King James? What's your problem, sort of thing. If you're reading an NIV or whatever Bible, they really don't care. But if you're reading a King James, it's like they usually go, well, this person, people are trained to go, well, this person's probably a cultist. That's what they say. That's what James White says. James White and Dan Wallace and many other people. If you believe that we have all the words of God today, Mark Ward will say you're a Ruckmanite. He'll say, he'll just label you King James only, and anyone who's ever been a weirdo in that group, well, you're part of that group. So you have to wear all the sins of those people as well, all the mistakes and all the kookiness and weirdness. And so what I find is the vast majority of people in this world who claim to be Christian simply are not Christian. When I go evangelizing, street preaching, you're handing out tracts, door knocking, whatever I'm doing, oftentimes you run into people who are religious people. But unfortunately, on the day of judgment, these people are going to be burning in an eternal hell. And that's just the reality of life. And Jesus said, broad is the way that leads to destruction. Narrow is the way to life. And so we know that there are many groups out there, Roman Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, groups that if people really believe the doctrines that they're teaching in those groups, that they're going to go to hell. We know that. And so, unfortunately, what happens with Orthodox groups, born again, Bible-believing Christian groups, people have this superstition against anyone who has a King James type of belief. And it used to just be the King James belief, but now it's actually moved into, if you have a Textus Receptus position, you're in a cult as well, because basically what we're coming up against is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry. So it's like coming up against Big Pharma or something like that. If you squeal and say, hey, they're doing this wrong, or they're abusing people here, or they're giving out, this type of drug and the side effects are causing suicide or whatever. You're coming up against a huge, massive corporation that will demonize you. And one of the funny things is there are cults out there that are so weird, like the Mormons. They're really weird, and you would get a lot of as sad as it is that people are in a cult and all the rest of it, you get a lot of comic relief hearing about the history of the Mormons. It's like sometimes I can't believe it. Even when I'm telling people about the Mormons, sometimes I'm like, I've got to double check that, and I go back and jump on the internet, and I'm like, there it is. The magic glasses and finding the plates and translating that, but they sort of plagiarized the King James Bible at the same time. They got all these strange sort of things, but Mormons are weird. And people, atheists and people who aren't Christians, and they should be mocking the Mormons, okay? But one group I find that they do mock is the Scientologists. Now, the Scientologists are just as weird, okay? Probably more of a modern day type of weirdness, with the whole thing of L. Ron Hubbard and, the aberrations in your brain and the Book of Dianetics and being cleared. And if you want to watch a really good documentary on that, it's called Cleared, I think it is. I actually saw that in the cinema when it came out, and it's just amazing. But they're a strange group, but they are actually against Big Pharma, okay? So they get like ultra demonized. Like people, they'll go through all sorts of groups and go, oh yeah, Mormons, oh yeah, this and that. Even the Roman Catholics are really, really strange. You know, the Mariolatry and praying to dead saints, having bits of dead bodies in their churches, dead saints and all that sort of stuff, and the brown scapula, and it's weird, it's strange, it's worthy of being mocked, as just religious superstition. So the Catholics, the Mormons, but Scientology gets picked on a lot, doesn't it? And I actually think it's because they come against Big Pharma. Like, you don't see that many people mocking the Mormons. You do see a lot of people mocking the Roman Catholics, but usually rightfully so for the child abuse scandals and things like that. Usually you just talk to a friend and you say, a friend of mine just the other day, I opened up a window and I looked at him and I said, it's like being in a Catholic confessional. He said, actually, the priest in the confessional in the country I was in, he molested kids, and he fully told me this whole horrible story, and I was like, oh. But that's Roman Catholic Church is renowned for that, and the priest got busted, but they just moved him back to Spain, from Argentina. It's quite amazing. But what I see with some of these people who are, obviously this lady isn't out to get people. She just wants the truth to be known. But unfortunately, what's happened is she's been hoodwinked by a huge company, by a huge industry. And so it's not just one company, obviously, but it's a huge industry, the Bible industrial complex. Okay. So what's happened is, this lady should go, okay, well, the Reformation happened, the Bibles of the Reformation, that's where we should really go for our scriptures, because most of these people are Reformed. It's quite amazing. I'm not a Calvinist, I'm not Reformed, okay, but most of these people are. And I understand that sometimes it can just be traditional, but sometimes people they say they've studied it themselves and they've become Reformed. It's like, okay, well, whatever. And I've got lots of friends who are Reformed, but at the end of the day, they should be going back and saying, hey, in the Reformation, they were using these scriptures. Those scriptures, obviously, they would be correct. They a lot of the creeds and things like that, the confessionals, the Second London Baptist Confession, a lot of people use, and they were based on these Reformation texts. So you have a new kid on the block. Okay, a new kid on the block. Westcott and Hort did a text. I'm going to tell you more about this, because by watching this, to me, it's just she's just being completely deceived. And so there are people who know better. And I would say that if I was even looking at Wes Huff, I don't mind a lot of the things Wes Huff does. Even Stephen Boyce, I don't mind what he does. But when it comes to scripture, when it comes to the King James issue, I do find that these guys are not being completely honest, and they're not really just coming out and putting everything on the line and saying, putting everything on the table and saying, let's just sort this out. I do find there is a lot of deception. And so specifically with some of the people like James White, Dan Wallace, people who are involved with the academy, the further you get up the chain, you realize that these people have a job that is sponsored by the Bible societies, and we're going to look at the Bible societies. And some of these people apologetically, this lady's got a huge influence. Like I think it was like even just on this video, there was lots and lots of hits. I might just get down and get the stats. Okay. So she's got like 267,000 subscribers. It's huge. And 31,000 views just in 3 days. Okay. So lots and lots of people would listen to what she's got to say. They obviously like what she's got to say. And so she would probably relate to a lot of, American, a lot of people around the world. But what's happened is she has been either offended by the King James people, and they're all lumped into one group, or she has actually been taught and trained against the position, which is usually what happens. I didn't know why King James onlyism to me was just this horrible thing that you just never get involved with, because they're just the kookiest, strangest. They're the Scientologists. You know what I mean? They're a cult. You realize that. And I've actually had people, really, really good friends, and we're talking about things, and they're, I've written a book about a certain scripture, and I was, showing the defense of this scripture because they asked about it. And then the guy just turned to me and said, "You're not one of those King James only cult people, are you?" And I just thought, you've known me for 10 years. You know what I mean? You appreciate what I'm doing, my ministry, street preaching, evangelizing. He's invited me to his house, and you pray for his sick kids. And then all of a sudden, he's just like, you one of those cult members? Oh, no. Sort of thing. I was like, dude, give me a break here. And so anyway, I'm going to go through this video, and we're just going to look at a common response to you. If you a lot of people who watch this channel, they obviously have a Textus Receptus position, or a King James preferred, or some King James only people. Oftentimes, most people don't even know what their position is. It just comes down to how you define terms and stuff like that. But let's go through this. Now, I noticed some of the middle of the video was just sort of talking about Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff like that. And I was tempted to just skip over it, but I thought I'll just go through the whole entire video, and I might just put it on like 1.25 speed during that time. But the rest of it, I'll just play at normal speed. So let's get straight into it.
To understand your Bible.
Whoops.
Have you ever felt like you need a dictionary to understand your Bible? Or how about John 2:16 from the Message translation?
So straight away, a dictionary to understand your Bible. There are lots and lots of words in like the NIV that are actually quite hard to understand. Let me just get archaic words in the NIV, and we'll just go through that. There are words that are just difficult. Propitiation. We know it's a difficult word. Okay, where's my page gone? Here it is. Okay, so archaic words, NIV. Okay, so this is from Sky of Zion, and I'm going to keep this website open. Okay, so this is from Vance, and some of these I would say, yeah, that's fine to have a word updated and things. I'm not against updating words. Okay, I'm but when you look at this type of thing, so say we've got the authorized version on this side, the NIV on this side, we see things like measures, cause, butter in the King James becomes curds, gristled becomes dappled, lasciviousness becomes debauchery, destroyed becomes decimated, sad becomes dejected. And so there are a lot of hard words. I mean, do you know exactly what some of these words mean if you just pull them straight out of their context here? Gauntness, leanness. And so I've actually seen like glistening. It's actually used in the King James, and I've seen people put that in their list. You know what I mean? And I'm just going through this going, okay, well, but I'm not saying that that's really the main issue, okay? But I am just pointing out that people have made lists, even in the New King James. There are a lot of things like, who says most assuredly? How many people have you heard in the last 50 years that say, yes, most assuredly, we will face some bad weather tomorrow? Most assured, no one. Verily, verily is obviously archaic. Now, truly, truly, in the ESV and others, okay, well, that's just a amen, amen. But at the end of the day, it's like most assuredly, that's it's not really that is archaic. And there are places in the New King James where just normal words are changed. Like Google Wahab in Supra. If you Google that and look at the equivalent, I might actually even just quickly do that. Wahab in Supra, New King James Version. Doesn't even come up. Wahhabin Supra. Here we go. Wahhabin Supra. No, it's all saying it doesn't have Wahhabin Supra. So I'm probably spelling it wrong, but it's like, what is Wahhabin Supra? That's what they have in the English in the New King James, and it's just like a place or something like that. It's like the place where they went, and they changed it to Wahhabin Supra. It's like, okay. So I just thought I'd start from the get-go and just say, you probably need a dictionary, just being a Christian. Now, I read the New King James for the first few years of my salvation, okay? The church I was in, they had the New King James. And I just thought it was an update of the Old King James. That's what I thought, until I kept studying, and got to the point where I was like, hang on, I'm finding places where there's quite a bit of difference between the Old King James and New King James, specifically in the Old Testament, because we were told to read a proverb a day, chapter of Proverbs every day, sort of thing. And I was going through, sometimes I just have a pocket Bible, a little Gideon's and an Old King James. I'm like, hang on, that's different to the New King James. And I'd start comparing them and then realize, hang on, there's heaps of differences here. Sometimes saying the opposite thing. And there are verses that say the opposite thing from the New King James to the Old King James. And I'm like, well, which one is it? And I actually thought the Old King James was in error, because that's what I was taught. And we weren't even in an anti-King James church. The church that I was in didn't like using the ESV wasn't around back then, but NIV and ASB and all the rest of it. They would use it maybe in a sermon. So you get a sermon where it's like, you want a certain type of reading. And so they might say, well, the NIV says this, and this ABC Bible says this, and blah, 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 just to get a point across. But usually it would come down to, okay, we read the New King James, but it was just sort of, if you got too far into it and started going, it's which one is the better Bible, it was frowned upon. And I remember my first pastor, he went to the United States where the church denomination had started. And there's 3,000 of this church that are 3,000 of this church, like a franchise sort of church, started in America. And he was sort of like around the board of elders in America, and he actually said, what about the King James issue with some of these verses that are missing? And he sort of got rebuked for just bringing it up by the main leaders. And so it's like, if you just even talk about this issue, you can get shut down. Okay, so I've let it go for 5 seconds and I'm already stopping it. So let's continue.
He told the dove merchants, get your things out of here. Stop turning my father's house into a shopping mall. Here's a dictionary word for you. Anachronism.
So that must be the message, stop turning my father's house into a shopping mall. But obviously the message is not supposed to be a Bible. It's just... people call it a Bible, which is really silly of them to do so. But I think it just brings confusion, because you go to the bookshop, it's in the Bible section, so you buy it, and then you're like, it's a bit of false advertising, really, because it is more. If it was just like someone's paraphrased thought about the Bible, and people will go, okay, that's what he thinks. But calling it a Bible is diabolical.
Christian, I guarantee you, at some point you will be asked which Bible translation is best, or you will ask this yourself. But the thing...
Yeah, and that's normal to do this. That's a normal reaction. That's what I asked myself. And I kept studying this until I got to the point where I realized that what I was taught, or what was sort of like the culture in Christianity, was wrong against the King James Version. And I was actually very illiterate when it came to this topic.
Thing is that the assumption is that there's an English translation that really is the best. And
yes, just like you will have translations of Russian books, Russian authors, say Tolstoy, you would have those translated into German, into Spanish, into French, into English. There are better translations. There are poorer translations. Anyone who is in the field of translation knows that there are good translations and there are bad translations. There are, and there's nothing wrong with having that. If you're learning a language, if you're learning Spanish or French or whatever you're learning, you might grab certain CDs or tapes or online stuff and go through it. But there's going to be ones that are better than others. There are some that even have poor accents. I've been through modern Greek courses, and the people in it have thick Spanish accents, and it's very hard to understand them even when they're speaking English. But then I'm thinking, are they sure they're getting these Greek words correct? And so, there are better ones out there. You're better off going with the better ones. And with everything in life, we ask, what is a better thing? There are better quality formats. We might get a DVD, or we watch something digitally, or we might be able to get it in Blu-ray. Although it's pretty old technology now, but it's like we're allowed as human beings to discriminate and say this car is a better car, this house is a better house, this job is a better job. But when it comes to Bible versions, we just got to sort of hug them all. I think this is very silly. Seems that most of these guys, James White and all the rest of it, they actually want you not to read the King James. Well, they actually don't mind if you just have it on your shelf and you look at it every now and then or whatever. But they basically, at the end of the day, they dance around it a lot. But at the end of the day, they will say, don't read it. Just get rid of it. Get the NIV, get the ESV, get the Lexham Standard Bible. Yes, look at the King James like it's a historical document like the Tyndale Bible or something like that. But don't use it as your daily Bible. You're going to miss out. There's mistakes in it. It's full of errors. And so they are judging, aren't they? Mark Ward is judging. And James White, Dan Wallace, Wes Huff, Stephen Boyce, these guys are judging, aren't they? When they're like, okay, this other edition is better. Because they're saying this other one is better than the King James. And so she's sort of saying, you can't really ask this question, but it's more so you can't have this answer, isn't it?
Truth of the fact is that the most accurate translation is the original language. But if we just...
So the original language wouldn't be a translation. So Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, if you have them by themselves, unless you're fluent in those languages, it won't help you at all. And I would dare say that she probably is not fluent in those languages. And so you've got these documents that they may as well be in Chinese. Okay. So you're going to have to get a translation that's good. But one thing that you'll see all the way through this video is she doesn't really even acknowledge that there are different original. So the word original can be used in several ways. Some people use it for the original documents that, Paul was writing and God was inspiring those words to be written. Sometimes it's used in that sense, the originals. Some people say the original, meaning the original languages. So that's, talking about not the autographs, but the apographs, the ones that came after that, the copies and things like that. Or it could be even printed editions of just the original languages. And so in the original Greek, it says this, in the original Hebrew. But what is not being said here is that there are differences in these texts. So most people in the Reformation used the Textus Receptus. That was used right up until roughly about Westcott and Hort's time, 1881. And then over a period of like sort of 50 years, it took a while for it to sort of settle in. But then they started doing these modern Bibles based upon that text, which is a different Greek text. So this doesn't seem to register here. throughout this whole video. It's not mentioned. And what I find is people, some people deliberately leave this type of thing out, and they only just talk about readability. It's like, oh, the King James is a little bit hard to read here and there, archaic terminology, and the morphology and syntax is a little bit difficult. But what they're not saying is that there are deleted verses. Like some of these Bibles have up to 43 deleted complete verses. Like to the NIV, I think it's 17 verses that are deleted. There's a lot of verses that are bracketed, or they're regulated to a footnote, or all this sort of thing. So that's not really even discussed. So you've got so basically you've got the Westcott and Hort text, and so that is the foundation and the basis for all the modern Greek texts that are used in most modern translations, mostly the Nestle-Aland text. And you've got the Textus Receptus. Okay, so what's the difference between them? There's 2,900 less words in the Textus Receptus. In the Westcott and Hort text. I'm looking at my StreamYard that makes me backwards, so I was looking at my other hand. And the Westcott and Hort text has 2,900 less words. It has 8,000 changes. Now we know that one tiny little dot, when the Jehovah's Witnesses say, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. And there's no difference in their Greek there. They're using the actual Westcott and Hort text. They actually love Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. They love these documents because of the Arian influence. And see, what a lot of people don't realize, and so I would think that that this lady would be absolutely shocked to find out, is that Unitarians had huge influence on the Westcott and Hort text. And so let me just point this out to you. The Bible Society, the British and Foreign Bible Society, started in 1804. Now, before that, there was lots of other Bible societies, but this is the one that became the Bible societies we know it today, the United Bible Societies. So 1804, William Wilberforce, great guy, a whole bunch of other people got together, started translating into other languages, started getting Bibles out there, King James Bibles. And so they were doing Textus Receptus editions, Masoretic Old Testament editions, and they were to be guided by the King James. So that's what they did. So from 1804, they started doing this. And basically they used the Textus Receptus for probably about 70 years. Now, it did take some other Bible societies a lot longer to actually gravitate toward a non-Textus Receptus text. And what you see also is some of these groups, like some Bible societies, like the Russian Bible Society, I'm not sure today, but they mostly have the Synodal Bible, which is accepted in Russia, and that's pretty much a Textus Receptus text. I had one pastor tell me there was 117 differences between the Russian Synodal Bible and the King James, and he was working on sort of amending those. But at the end of the day, the original Bible societies in 1804, they used the same underlying Greek text as the King James, the Hebrew and the Greek, and they were to use the King James Bible as a guide for an ultimate translation that they should, in the foreign language, that they should aim to having their Bible as. So if they were going to the Congo and translating a Bible, they wanted like a King James in their language. And so what happened in 1831, there were so many Unitarians that had joined the Bible Society. Unitarians are sort of like Jehovah's Witnesses. They don't believe in the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. They don't believe in a Trinity. They don't believe in the deity of Christ. So many Unitarians had joined that group that when Trinitarians got up at their conference and started praying in the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, or saying that Jesus is Jehovah and all this sort of stuff, they were getting booed and heckled. So they actually formulated what's called the Trinitarian Bible Society. Notice Trinitarian, because the Bible societies had become Unitarian, pretty much. So there were still Trinitarians in there, but you had to be quiet about it. And so what we see, that's 50 years before Westcott and Hort. So already in England, there was a lot of Unitarian influence, and a lot of people who are involved in text criticism in those days were Unitarians. So when you come to Westcott and Hort they had a Unitarian working with them on their Greek text called George Vance Smith. Now, he actually wrote a book about how he was so glad that the Westcott and Hort had allowed a lot of these verses to be omitted. Like, there are three that bear record in heaven: the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one. That was omitted in their text. Things were changed, like God was manifest in the flesh to who appeared in a body. And so they took out God. The strongest reference to Jesus being God. They actually introduced probably the biggest Greek grammatical blunder in the Nestle-Aland series of texts. And so obviously, Westcott and Hort has a train going to the Nestle-Aland, because basically you have Westcott and Hort. They used, the Nestle-Aland text used Westcott and Hort. They used the Weymouth and the Weiss text, and that formulated the Nestle text. The Nestle text got to, I think it was in the 1950s or 1960s, and you had Bruce Metzger, Aland. It's called the Nestle-Aland. That's after Kurt Aland. And basically, Bruce Metzger said that they just got the text of Westcott and Hort and amended it according to what they felt like. So they used a Roman Catholic guy called Carlo Martini. He was a Jesuit. He was actually in line to be a pope at one stage. He's passed away now, so is Bruce Metzger. A lot of these guys have passed away. But they were using this type of text, and they were using the Westcott and Hort text. And so, but a lot of them don't want you to know that Unitarian influences on that text. The Unitarian who worked with Westcott and Hort wrote a book saying he was so glad that a lot of these places were changed. Also, verses were weakened about an eternal hell and things like that. And so he believed that Jesus was a created being. So it's a bit like having a Jehovah's Witness working on the text. And so, up until then, the Trinitarian Bible Society, they were printing the King James. They started doing foreign language Bibles, and they've done lots of foreign language Bibles around the world. And so anyway, I just sort of lay that groundwork because that seems to be completely unknown to, and I should really get her name. I keep calling her, which is, if she ever did watch this, which I doubt, she would, but say Melissa. Okay. So, does Melissa know about this? I don't think so. Looking at a video, it doesn't seem like she knows really anything about this. And so I would just say that she really does need to know about this, because this is the main issue. The main issue is not so much the readability, because there have been tons of Textus Receptus Bibles put out on the market. Now, a lot of people like myself, we've gone through these editions with a fine-tooth comb and found them wanting in a sense where they don't really match up to the King James in every place. Okay, so we can be a bit disappointed with that, where we're reading through the New King James and go, why did they put that there? Or, why have they got that italic there? They shouldn't have it there, And so, but at the end of the day, if you read a New King James, you will get primarily a roundabout a Textus Receptus Bible. You can read the modern King James, and I've even done an update, the King James Version 2023 edition. It came out King James Version 2016 edition, and I worked on it a bit more, and it's the King James Version 2023 edition, which is just an update of archaisms, just basically making it readable as the New King James, but without the problems that the New King James has. And so there are plenty of alternatives for people who go, I can't read it. There's plenty of alternatives out there. So, but we still go, the King James is the best. There's nothing that has come close to the King James, because the people who did it were just so far advanced in their scholarship that it's a beautiful work of art. But I understand if some people struggle reading that, well, don't just settle for, I'm going to just jump straight into these other texts that are influenced by Unitarians. The Jehovah's Witness text, they have the Westcott and Hort text. They use a Nestle-Aland type of text, okay? The same as the NIV, the ESV, and others. So all these other Bibles are based upon different texts, a different text. So we should really recognize that the Reformation text of Textus Receptus is superior. The King James Bible, Geneva Bible, Bishop's Bible, all Tyndale, all based upon a Textus Receptus model. The early Bible societies, all based upon a Textus Receptus model. But then Westcott and Hort with Unitarian influence, and then later on Nestle Alarm with Roman Catholic influence, Jesuit Carlo Martini, heretics like Bruce Metzger, Kurt Aland. Bruce Metzger's final student was Bart Ehrman, so that sort of gives you a bit of a understanding of the heretical type of concepts that were coming through. Basically, if you believe what Bruce Metzger said, you will be a heretic. You believe that God actually made errors in the original. It's bad enough to say that there's variants and scribes got it wrong, but he says God got it wrong. It's just like Matthew got it wrong. But if you believe that the words are inspired, Matthew didn't get it wrong, did he? But he believes that Matthew got lots of things wrong. And so did Luke, and so did Paul. And errors in the original documents. It's quite amazing. So anyway, let's just continue.
Just think about it. I mean, just by logic, you have to translate the Greek and Hebrew and the little bit of Aramaic of these original languages into other languages. Logically, it follows that you're going to get different translations because of language changes. So
sure. If you get the New King James, the KJV 2000, the modern King James, the literal King James, the King James Updated Names Edition, the KJV 2023 that I've worked on, even the KJV 2016. There's differences between editions that I've worked on. But at the end of the day, that's not the issue. See, that seems like a logical conclusion that all language needs updating. So we need the NIV, we need the ESV, we need these. But what's not being said here is, and I'm just going to jump on this page. So a friend of mine, he passed away in the last few years. Now, he worked on this page for quite a lot of years. So let me just show you one example. Okay, so in John chapter 5, verse 3 and 4, most people don't even know that this is missing from their Bible. But it says here, in the King James, in these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in, was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. So we can see that's the same in the 1611 edition, in Tyndale's edition, in Wycliffe's edition. So it's in, it's in the red. This guy is calling these ones counterfeit versions because it just says, like say in the NIV, here lay a great number of disabled people, or here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. And that's it. And so it says in the CSB, omitted, number 4, verse 4. So that's omitted. And he also, there's, I think it's 42 English words from the King James omitted. So is it translating the same words, or is it actually altering the words? So I'm all for things being understandable. And so say Mark Ward, he makes quite a big kerfuffle about the word halt. Okay. He says the word halt in the Bible was one of the first ones that he realized, hang on, it doesn't mean to stop. We've watched so many German movies over the years of World War II, halt, it means stop. He's saying it doesn't mean stop. Now, after years of just hearing Mark Ward say that, I actually thought one day, actually, when it's saying lame, that means one leg has stopped. So it actually does include a stopping, But anyway, let's just say that Mark's completely right on this, okay? That it's just, it just needs updating. So he's saying that we really should get away from a King James Bible because it's got these type of problems. It's got this word halt. And if we read, these impotent folk of blind, halt, and withered, we're like, I don't know what halt means, so I guess I better just go and get an NIV or an ESV. So then we go to the NIV, and it does say lame here, and I would say that's a perfectly acceptable rendering of halt, okay. But at the end of the day, look how many, like look at the ESV. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed, and that's it. All of these 42 English words are deleted. They're gone. And so look at the amount of Greek words here. So we see the Textus Receptus here, and the Greek, it stops here. So all of these Greek words are deleted. So that's what we're saying, 2,900 less Greek words. And when you go through all of these, when you go through like the last 12 verses of Mark, so let's just have a quick look at that. So that's the King James there, has all of this written. But then when you look at the NIV, the most reliable early manuscripts and other ancient witnesses do not have Mark. So they're basically putting doubt on it. Some of them regulate it to the margin. I think it was the Revised Standard Version. So yeah, they've got all these footnotes saying that it shouldn't be in there. 12 complete verses. So is it just faithfully translating, or is it actually a different text? The woman caught in adultery, the pericope adulteri. And I'm just showing you a few examples here. There's hundreds and hundreds. There's thousands of examples. So the pericope adulteri in John, let's go there. This whole story, in their Greek text, it's double bracketed, which means it's definitely not in the original. 85% of the majority text has it. Even when you go to the last 12 verses of Mark, every Greek Bible has it, except for Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, except for 2 manuscripts. There's like 1,654 manuscripts that have it. And so here in the pericope adulteri, about 85% of the manuscripts have it. And it's been observed that a lot of these manuscripts have lectionary markings. So if you were reading through the story of the celebration at Pentecost, would you want to read the pericope adulteri story in the middle of it? It's a bit like sort of the woman with the issue of blood. It's like you might want to talk about that at Christmas or something, so you might just skip over that, or you might just grab that bit and put it at the end. Or so that's what happened. That many times it was put at the end because they were reading through the Bible in a sequence like a lectionary, and so sometimes they were getting it and putting it back in. And because we know they were doing that, because sometimes they just put it in a few verses too early or a few verses too late, they were doing this type of thing. And so, these versions basically say, the earliest manuscripts don't include these, and when oftentimes they do. So anyway, you can go through any one of these. Let me just pick a random one. Okay, I won't even look. We'll just go up to the Gospels. Or Acts 17:26. And he hath made of one blood all nations. Here, the Revised Version, and he hath made of one every nation. So one blood is here. That's a different. It's not saying the same thing. If we were to translate anyone's work from a foreign language into English, and it had this type of omissions and changes, we would be very upset. It's like, I want the full story. I don't want 2,900 less underlying Russian words in the book. It's like, and I was disappointed when someone told me about the Fox's Book of Martyrs, because I read through that and was like, man, this is amazing. And they said it's actually only 4% of the original. You're missing 96%. I was like, what? Where's the rest of it? And so, some people think that the Roman Catholics got involved with the printing of that, and they sort of got rid of some of these stories that were damning to the church. But I want the full story. I don't want, you don't want to go through, something like, no one wants that in anything. If you watch a movie, imagine if you watch the deleted scene and it's like the main point of that scene, you're like, oh, and you don't really or the thing is, what we've got, these omissions, many times they're creating Greek grammatical blunders in the text. But see, one of the principles of their Bible translation methodology, or not their Bible translation methodology, but their reconstructing the text, is that the hardest reading is most likely the best. And so they go with hard readings where there are grammatical errors and blunders and mistakes. So say God was manifest in the flesh, it has a predicate without a subject. You have who appeared in a body. It's probably the greatest grammatical blunder in the Nestle-Aland text. It's like a Greek schoolboy wouldn't make that error. And even in English, great is the mystery of godliness, who appeared in the body. And so they actually have to make it into a song because it's so abrupt. So all of a sudden, Paul's got the guitar, he's got his banjo out, and he's starting to twang on the banjo and start singing this song about he appeared in the body. Who appeared in it? Well, actually means who appeared in the body. That's what os means. And so who appeared in the body? So he's singing this song. Apparently, this is according to Westcott and Hort. They adopted this type of narrative and popularized it. And unfortunately, even the New King James has the right reading of theos there, God, but it has it written like a psalm. So I might even go to it. I might even see what they've got here. And the more I try to explain this, it's like, people should know about these things. God was manifest. God was manifest. So the theos is changed to os. But clearly, os, if you have a line in the O and a line above it, is a nomina sacra. And so what would you rather have? The theos, God was manifest in the flesh, with huge attestation from the early church, huge attestation from the majority text. But then you have os here, which creates this massive blunder, the worst blunder. It's a bit like, I can't even think of such a blunder in English. It would take time to think of something so bad, But that's why they say this is a song. They had to have this hymn theory, which is amazing. So anyway, I'll drop that back down and let's go on with this.
The question really should be not which one is best, but which one is accurate. And the great news about this is that there actually are a lot of translations that are very accurate.
So it doesn't matter how accurate a Bible is if it's translated from the wrong text. Okay. If you had the Constitution of the United States and you wanted to translate that into French, but some people along the way, some left-leaning people, they didn't like the Constitution and they crossed a few little things out and added a few things here and there, and it got to France and they translated that. Well, it doesn't matter how accurately they translated. Every translation should be accurate. So it doesn't matter how accurate they've translated it if it's based on the wrong manuscript. And so this is the main problem. And so that's why people are sticking with the King James, because they're like, well, I want all the words of God. I don't want 42 words missing in John chapter 5, just all of a sudden. I'd rather have to get a dictionary every now and then than to just, like Mike Ward talks about false friends. What about missing, abducted friends? I like those verses. I've memorized those verses. I like the doctrine that it teaches. The people in the Reformation liked the doctrine that those verses taught. The early guys in the Bible Society, they were going through, memorizing. They were doing translations into many, many different languages. Textus Receptus Bibles, flooding the world with TR Bibles, and people were memorizing those verses. Then all of a sudden it's like, no, those verses shouldn't be in there anymore. And so, why not? Oh, because we've got these two old manuscripts, Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. It's like, okay, but those manuscripts don't agree. In the Gospels alone, there's 3,000 differences between them. And Herman Hoskier, who actually did that count, he said, well, basically there was 17 other criteria that he could have counted as differences, but he didn't. He just basically went through and just counted, did sort of like a cursory count, and just pointed out the main differences between them. And there was 3,000 just in the Gospels. So if these are both old manuscripts of about 350, 360, why would they be so different? And why didn't anyone copy these? They just disappeared. people in the Reformation, Erasmus, he had access to it. He thought it was a back translation from a Latin document. It's full of error. He didn't use it. John Mill, he said the same thing. And then so all of a sudden, when England goes through a massive faith crisis, the Bible societies have been invaded by Unitarians. Westcott and Hort have a Unitarian working on their Greek. And then all of a sudden, these are important manuscripts. And there's very questionable readings. And the thing is too, where does the Septuagint comes from these manuscripts? The apocryphal readings come from these manuscripts. And so we've just got to be really careful. We can't just gobble down whatever people tell us to gobble down. We've got to be discerning. And why wouldn't we just go, I'm siding with the reformers? Why are we going with these new texts? Or is it because you've sort of been browbeaten into this? Is it because it's sort of like, hey, you better wear the mask. That's what they've told you to do. You better go and get because, mate, everyone else is doing it. You don't want your grandma to die, do you? This type of pressure. If you're in a church and it's like, well, are you one of those cultists? And it's not just, you're a King James person anymore. James White has made it very clear. If you're a Textus Receptus advocate, you are basically King James only person. It's like, okay. And so they've just sort of broadened the circle. So it's like, you're a cultist, King James only. Now it's like, okay, let's just broaden that circle. And even in the King James only controversy, one of the five criteria for being in a King James group, it says the textual argument, and it actually has a footnote talking about Zane Hodges and Arthur Farstead, the guys behind the New King James. So they're King James only, apparently. It's so weird. Well, why have they got mentioned that there? Yeah, they're majority text guys. But even Dan Wallace, who was sort of a majority text guy for a while, he says that if you're a majority text guy, you're a Marcionite, modern day Marcionite. And Marcion was one of the worst heretics of the early church. The Dan Wallace says if you're just even a majority text guy, not even a TR person, not even a King James person, you're a Marcionite. So I think that these guys just have a bias towards their position, and they're just demonizing everyone else. And so anyway, let's continue.
However, there are some that you should not read at all. More on that later. So here's really what it comes down to, all right? It's important to understand that the Bible was originally written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. We have English translations that attempt to take that language and put it in our language. So when translators are translating from those languages into English, it's very normal that different styles of translation can and are used. And we find this with any language that's translated into another. So there are words that can be in Hebrew, Greek, or Aramaic that make no sense in English. So what translators will do is they'll take a word that's close enough and put it in its place. I live out here in New Mexico, all right? Many people out here are bilingual, and they know exactly what I mean by this. Here's just one example of this, all right? We adopted this little white kitten not too long ago. Well, actually, he adopted us. We named him Toby, and he's just the most adorably reckless thing in my house. My husband wanted to come up with a fun nickname for him, all right? And he thought that Little Milk would be a fun name because, well, my husband loves milk, and the cat was white, and it reminded him of milk. I should tell you how much my husband loves milk. But to be honest with you guys, I thought it was a really dumb name. I thought it was really lame. And I'm like, Little Milk, really? That's weird. I'm not calling him that. So I decided we have to come up with an alternative here. Well, we have some wonderful neighbors who are fluent in Spanish. And I asked my friend about this. I asked her, how do you say little milk in Spanish? And it was actually a very educational linguistic conversation because she said it could be said in 3 different ways. Hold on, I wrote it down. She said it can either be leche pequeña, leche chica, or leche chiquita. Isn't Spanish a beautiful language? But there's like rules to this, all right? So she said, first, because we're not using it in a sentence, but instead as a nickname, and he's a boy. So she changed the gender usage because gender's a thing or something. And she said that if it were her, she'd call him Lechito. So when he's naughty, I middle name him Toby Lachito, and I think it's pretty catchy. But I thought it was kind of cool because she almost went, straight up Spanish linguist professor with her fancy quill pen about the proper way on how to use little milk in a sentence because of the grammar structure and probably a bunch of big fancy grammatical words and structures or whatever. Let it be known that I am an almost author, so I know some things about words, kind of. So my point is that we do this in everyday life, and Bible translation or any translation of language is no different. And this can help explain one reason why we have different translations. You end up with a spectrum of word for word translations that try to keep as close to the original language as possible. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have more of a paraphrase translation of the Bible. And in the middle, you have like a thought for thought translation. So an example of a word for word translation would be like an NASB, which is a New American Standard Bible, or one of my personal favorites, which is the ESV or English Standard Version. That's my version of choice to read and study. And even the King James Version would be, considered like a middle of the road word for word translation. Now, the most literal translation you can get is called an interlinear. You have the original language, and then right underneath it and next to it, it's directly translated into English. And it can be kind of...
So pretty much what she's saying here is you usually get this type of card from the Bible societies or from the NASB or ESV guys, and they'll have this type of chart where it's like, you got paraphrases, and then you got word for word and thought for thought, dynamic equivalent, that type of thing. And so you have a spectrum there. So she's basically describing that exact thing. But the thing is, an interlinear is only as good as the English words underneath that interlinear. If you have, John chapter 1, verse 18, where it has the only begotten Son, okay? So the only begotten Son in old interlinears, it will have those exact words, because that's what it means. Monogenes theos, monogenes weos, the only begotten Son. Now, modern versions have monogenes theos, the only begotten God. Okay, so what they have to do to soften that, because it's a Gnostic heresy to have a begotten God, and so to soften that, they have to say, well, monogenes doesn't always mean only begotten. It means like unique or one of a kind. But see, Jesus is the only begotten Son, because are you a son of God? I am. And so if it's the unique Son, it's very vague, isn't it? But so you can't just change it there. You can't just have, the one and only Son of God, the unique Son or whatever they have there. Let's have a look at what they actually do have, because it'll be in this list. John chapter 1, verse 18. Okay, so we see all the way through, right down to Tindo, begotten Son, because that's what it means, So if you have an interlinear that has begotten Son, that's great. Okay, but you may as well just read the English anyway, or a literal English Bible will be equivalent to an interlinear. Okay, because the only thing an interlinear won't do is it'll give you word for word things that in a translation they might have a Hebrew idiom that's in the Greek language, and so it has to be brought across as like a type of idiom or explained in a different way. If you go literally just word for word and you don't understand the idiom, unless it's got a footnote there explaining it, you're like, oh, there's an error. That the interlinear is more accurate, and that's where a lot of people get lost, and they think the King James has errors in it because they're not fluent in these languages. So obviously, if something is written in Chinese, it's going to have idioms, raining cats and dogs and things like that. So okay, let's look at this. No one's ever seen God, the only Son. So that the unique Son, the only Son, the only Son, the one and only Son, the uniquely existing God, the one and only. So they've actually had to morph the only begotten into the one and only to fit. Some of them have Son, don't they? But then some of them have God. So which one is it? So this is the problem with these new Bibles. They contradict each other. This isn't just a translational choice. This is because if you look at the Greek, one has ho, monogenes huios, the only begotten son. Monogenes has meant only begotten since. It still means, if you were to ask a Greek today, what does monogenes mean? That's only begotten. That, yeah, the Greeks have been reading their Bible in Greek for 2,000 years, not in Swahili, not in Chinese. They know their language. The morphology and syntax of Greek hasn't changed that much in 2,000 years. And so, but here we have monogenes theos, don't we? The only begotten God. But unfortunately, that's a Gnostic heresy, and it was brought up by the early church writers. So they were writing about this. This was a controversy of having the only begotten God. So this is a Gnostic heresy. So what do we do with that? Well, we redefine this word monogenes to mean unique, one and only, the one and only God. But then you can't just change it there, can you? Or else it's a bit sus. You're sort of leaving your fingerprints there. It's like, well, we better go and sort of amend every other place where it has monogenes. So that's when you have, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, instead of for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. So it even changes John 3:16. So this is how serious it is to amend, just to redefine a word. They've got the wrong word. They've got son here, they've got God here, so God's wrong. But they actually redefine this word. And historically, monodikos means unique, one of a kind. They would have used that, but monogenes. All the Bibles, up until Westcott and Hort time, had only begotten in all languages. But then all of a sudden, the heretics come along and it's like, oh, we've got to squeeze this in. Westcott and Hort didn't even have this reading in there. They were ashamed of this reading. They have only begotten son. That's why you have some of them saying son. It is God, the only son, but the unique one who is himself God. They're so confused with how they're going to write it. Some of them say God, some of them say son. It's all over the place. And so this is a huge problem. And so if you have an interlinear Bible, well, which Greek text do you have the words above or under? And are you going to have God or son? And are you going to have unique or only begotten there? Because it's a very important doctrine, the only begottenness of the Son. If you understand the Trinity, I'm not just talking about a cursory look at the Trinity. I'm not just talking about, knowing that, God is, three separate people and, their personages and all that. I'm talking about the deep theological things of the Trinitarian doctrine. The only begottenness of the Son is very important. And so this is getting removed in our Bibles. And so anyway, so when it's saying, when Melissa is saying these interlinears are the best, well, it just depends on what words are underneath, because there are multiple words. There's probably just as many words that are redefined as that are changed, in a sense, where the Greek underlying, because you have 8,000 changes in the modern Greek from the Textus Receptus. You have 2,900 less words. And so, in an interlinear, how are you going to go when you get to this verse and all these words are missing? But you just have the interlinear for those words in the Greek. So let's go down to the Greek and have a look. So you just have an interlinear for those ones underlying the modern Bibles, but all these the missing friends, they're all gone. From there, all those words are gone. So it's like, the interlinear is the best. It's like, if you had the same text, you would say that, but it's not the same text. And that's why I'm saying, she either doesn't know this, or perhaps she does know it, or perhaps she's confused. And I know there are people out there who are bringing confusion. There are people out there who want you to be like Bart Ehrman and have confusion. God is not the author of confusion. God said we will know the words. How can you commit the sin? At Revelation chapter 22, verses 18 and 19, don't add to the words or take away from the words. How can you commit that sin if you don't know where the words are? I know where the words are. I can commit that sin. If I was just to go, I don't think that The Bible should say, I think it was an example, Revelation 3:20 that she brings up later. Well, I shouldn't say that. If I just chopped out half the verse, I would be in trouble. That's a sin, because I know those words belong there. But I guess if you don't know which words belong where, how can you ever commit that sin? We will know where the words of God are. And so we do. That's why this is a big issue to us. It's not just about readability. And the thing is too, I mean, the Hebrew language, the Greek language, they were, in a sense, quite difficult to even native Greeks and native Hebrews. So I would recommend people try and read the King James. If you can't, second best, read a Textus Receptus Bible at least. You know what I mean? Because these other Bibles have all these errors and mistakes, and the underlying text is not good. It's influenced by heretics. Okay, so let's continue.
Kind of clunky if you don't know English grammatical structures. And just in my opinion, I think that an interlinear is highly recommended for Bible study. It's a great tool to use next to another word for word or another thought for thought translation. This is honestly one of my favorite things to do, is to take an ESV and an NIV, which is a New Interlinear Translation. That's one of the more popular ones. Or even a New Living Translation, an NLT, and just compare them all. And it's really edifying Bible study. Like, maybe it's just me, but I get a total kick out of that. I'm like, oh.
But what happens when you come to these verses? Like, and so this is the thing: how much Bible are you reading? Realistically, let's just jump to a few verses here. Have a look at the changes. Okay, so when you come to this one, you got the New King James out. You got the King James. You've got the your Amplified and the ESV. You got all these things, and it says, "Who, when he cometh, shall speak unto thee." It's gone. And so you're sitting in a Bible study, and someone's just like, "Oh, did they just skip a bit, or did they just stop reading?" It just doesn't have those words. That's just one example. Look how many examples there are. I'm just randomly just clicking. 1 Corinthians 14. Let the women. And so I was actually doing a Bible study on these verses the other day where it says, let your women, just randomly, this has just come up. But most of these verses in the King James are talking about a husband and wife situation. They're not talking about, the whole church coming down on a woman. Because it says, in the New King James, it says, let the woman keep silence, or do not let the woman usurp authority over the man, where it actually has, do not let the woman have or usurp authority over a man in the New King James, which means any man. But then it goes on to talk about children and family, and so it's obviously talking about, it talks about Adam and Eve. It's talking about a marriage. So here, let your women keep silent in the churches. So it's these change doctrine. So you just got to be careful about which Bible you can run off and read. Galatians, that was confirmed before God in Christ. It's huge. The whole doctrine of in Christ, I'm sure that she's heard of it and probably has adopted a lot of it, and have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him, of the image of him who created it. It's just changed there. And sometimes these can be insignificant, but sometimes they're very important. So anyway, let's just continue on.
Look at this. Look. Wow, I understand that word a lot better because that translation says it that way. Oh, the interlinear says this, and just nerd out, you guys. It's great, okay? It's good fun. This is good fun for us. Mark my words, one of the best things that you can do for your Bible comprehension is to compare other translations to each other. Multiple translations are not the enemy. So,
okay, she's saying multiple translations are not the enemy. Now, I just remembered a verse. Now, tell me if this is going to bring edification to your church, because this is like a conclusion verse, okay? Now, the King James says, I would that they were even cut off, which trouble you. So people were saying to the Galatians, you have to be circumcised to be saved, okay? So Paul's saying, I wish that they were even cut off, which trouble you, in a sense where, they were disfellowship. Look at Tyndale. I would to God that they were separated from you, which trouble you. So it's very clear that this cut off language is talking about disfellowshipped. Now let's read the NIV. As for those agitators, I wish they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. What? Cut off their private parts. That's what it's saying. These are Bibles. You know what I mean? I'm not swearing here. Just because I brought this up doesn't mean I'm a weirdo. NASV, I wish that those who are troubling you would even mutilate themselves. Now, can you imagine Paul reading through Jesus' words and turn the other cheek, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you? He's going around preaching all this stuff, and he's living that. But then in Galatians, right at the end, he's just like, got a bit mad, and he's just like, I wish that they would go get a butcher knife and just start hacking away at their private parts. That's what these Bibles are saying. Can you imagine Paul even thinking this type of thing? It's just the most bizarre. These are the most bizarre things that I've read. But look at the Holman Christian Standard. I wish those disturbing you might also get themselves castrated. Castrate themselves, mutilate themselves, castrate them. What does the King James say again? I wish that they were cut off, which trouble you. Tyndale has separated. What on earth? And so, reading, these Bibles, put them all side by side and read like 4 at once. Okay, well, we've got the King James there, cut off. So, I wish that they were cut off from these Galatians too. They shouldn't be in fellowship with these people. They should separate from these people. They're bringing a false gospel. They're accursed people, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, let's get the NIV. I want to refresh myself with a new sense of what it means. As for these agitators, I wish that they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. Let themselves be mutilated, mutilate themselves. And this even has New World Translation of the Jehovah's Witnesses is always at the bottom here. They would get themselves emasculated. It's saying the same thing as the New World Translation most of the time, and it's usually opposite of the King James. And so you got to be very careful with these new modern Bibles. So yes, a lot of it could be, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. It's like some people don't understand the ramifications of that. So they overlook these things. And it's, it looks like it's saying the same thing, but just with different words. But it just leads to absolute confusion, utter confusion. And so I might see if I can get Zechariah. I'm pretty sure he would have it here. Maybe wounds in thine hands. Bible Hub. So we'll get the Bible Hub up. Okay. And let's have a look at this because it's like King James Bible. And one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in thine hands? And he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Now let me just enlarge in this. Get rid of the pop-up. Okay, so NIV, what are these wounds in your body? New Living Translation, what about those wounds on your chest? English Standard Version, what are these wounds on your back? Berean Standard Bible, what are these wounds on your chest? King James has, what are these wounds in thine hands? Now, look at the New King James. What are these wounds between your arms? That's why I don't like the New King James. It's not a New King James. It's changed. New American Standard Bible. What are these wounds between your arms? Again, between your arms. NASB, between your arms. Legacy Standard Bible, between your arms. Amplified Bible, between your arms. Christian Standard Bible, wounds on your chest. What are these wounds on your chest? What are these wounds between your arms? What are these wounds in Arabic Bible in plain Aramaic Bible? Sorry, in plain English. What are these wounds in your hands? Septuagint, wounds between thine hands. Contemporary English version. Some of them ask, why are they wounded? It just avoided the whole thing. wounds in the midst of your hands. Are you getting edified? Or are you going, hang on, isn't this some like messianic, talking about what are these wounds in thine hands? And he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Okay, let's just drop that down. Let's just continue.
Well, let me get back to this spectrum of translations just for a second, because I kind of want to break this down a little bit more. So when you think about it, English is actually a very limited language compared to other languages. So what ends up happening is you get a variety of different English translations. Now,
it's a limited language. I really doubt that. English is a very colorful language. We have a lot of extra words in our English language that we can use, which are not in other languages. Many other languages only have one word for something. We can have 6 or 7 words for something. Like, say, for example, the word wine, being Anglo-Saxon, German-based, it seems a bit more street level, the wine. The champagne, for the French, because the French speaking people ruled in England for 200 years. So a lot of the French words are, highbrow words sort of thing. People in the ivory tower, So they would say things like, I've got a chair. It's very French. A stool is very Anglo-Saxon and German. And that's why when we listen to Hitler, we get a chill just listening to the German language, because it's real street level. It's Germanic, where French is very lovely, very nice. And we always think of French people being, the highbrow type of people. But at the end of the day, we have gone the English out of all other languages. We've gone around the world and borrowed things from the Indian, Urdu, Hindi language. We've borrowed things from Xhosa, Swahili, from Arabic, because most of the time, England ruled half the world. So a lot of names and things that have come into English. So we have a smorgasbord of words that we can use. And so, at the end of the day, I definitely wouldn't say English is limited. Now, in the era of 1611, there were lots of, they weren't short of words. And in fact, a lot of those words that have become archaic, show that they had lots of other extra words that have just sort of dropped off usage. So,
Good friend, Wesley Huff. I've mentioned him a few times on my...
Okay, so Wes Huff. Now, I will debate Wes Huff on any of these issues about Textus Receptus, King James Bible, anytime, anywhere. Absolutely, will debate him.
My channel. He's a historian and a Bible scholar and has created a great visual to help explain this. I will also leave a link to his website in the description to check out. He's got some really good stuff.
So what I find Wesley Huff, he does exactly the same thing as what seems to be done in this video, which is downplay the whole concept of missing words, change words, redefinition of terms. And so, here we have, Old English, it's written that way. Middle English, it's written this way. And then the King James, Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Then Modern English, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing, this type of thing. But they're not going to places like, say, in Proverbs or Jeremiah, where the Septuagint amends the verse and it's saying something completely different. They're not going to those places, are they? They're just going to places where they know, well, roundabout, that it's going to be saying the same thing. But they're oftentimes, usually in almost every chapter of the Bible, there's something missing, there's something changed, sometimes without even a footnote in these Bibles. So you don't even know it's gone. If you didn't have a King James and you weren't comparing it side by side, you wouldn't even know that, they've deleted, 15 words here. What's going on? Anyway, let's continue.
But this helps us see how this works. This also gives us a perspective that kind of pops our bubble when it comes to English Bible translations. Okay, so yeah.
Okay, so he's got, Wycliffe, Tyndale, Matthews. So he's going through, the King James version issue here. But then, he's just sort of say, okay, this is the history of the Bible. And then it's just, now we've got the ESV and these other ones, and they're just as good, And then it's like, oh, and by the way, we found these other manuscripts that help us, and just keep it all light and don't show you side by side what's being changed.
Yes, there are a lot, but like I said before,
so this is the chart that I was saying is pretty much exactly what you would see. The New American Standard Bible guys, I think they even had this on the back of one of their study Bibles or whatever. It's like formal equivalence, word for word, interlinear. Then the NASB, because they put the NASB there because it's like, well, I want a Bible that's really close to the Greek and Hebrew. It's the NASB. Then the amplified, like the amplified. See, the thing is, these are based on different texts. So it's sort of like talking about Bible covers. We got blue ones here, red ones here, and green ones here. They're not really dealing with the fact that in the New Testament alone, the King James Version, the Greek text alone, the King James Version has 2,900 more Greek words. It has 8,000 changes from the Nestle Alarm text. They're not mentioning that, are they? All the rest of these are based upon the newer text, the Westcott and Hort type text. But these aren't. So why are they just in there like they're just dangling little things? It's like these are chalk and cheese. They're saying very different things. In many places, there's omissions. Many places, there's changes. So then you got dynamic equivalence. So basically, thought for thought, which, I think it just messes up the text. And then paraphrases, which I probably wouldn't even really go to. And then it's got the New World Translation, saying that it's, and the Mirror Translation, they're really bad, So what I find, like, say with Wes Huff, because I've watched most of his material over the years, Wes will say, the New World Translation is really bad. It's done by a cult group, Jehovah's Witnesses. Why isn't he talking about the underlying Greek text was formulated by Unitarian George Van Smith with Westcott and Hort? Why isn't he talking about that? So it just seems like they want to talk about cults. And this is a sure sign that someone is, if you just state the obvious, okay, if I just made a YouTube channel and I'm saying Mormons are really bad, Mormons are bad, you're like, yeah, Mormons are bad. But that doesn't mean that I've got good theology. I'm on your side, I'm on the Bible's side. I'm just pointing out the obvious about a cult. And so what I find with some of these Bible version issues, people can go, Jehovah's Witnesses are really bad. But then they're like, the Passion Translation, but it's sort of like us as, King James, Textus Receptus people, we're looking at the NIV and pointing out hundreds and hundreds of places of poor translation, of, redefinition of terms, of the underlying text missing and all this sort of stuff. But it's just never brought up. It's just never even looked at. And that's actually frowned upon. It's like, why are you demonizing the NIV? It's made by Christians, and they just go right to the scraping the bottom of the barrel and going, yeah, that's bad. So it's a bit like, to me, this is sort of like, how much rat poison do you want in your meal? So you got the King James, which has absolutely no traces. They've looked at it for 400 years. It stood the test of time. There's no traces of rat poison in that one. New King James, there's a sprinkling of it there. Okay, it might be easier to digest, a bit of MSG on it. You can swallow it really quick and eat a whole bunch of it at a time. But sometimes you're sort of swallowing. You eat it for a long period of time. In deep study, you do find problems. Like I found about 500 problems in the New Testament. That's why I worked in the King James Version 2023 edition, because I couldn't justify handing out the New King James like I used to. And so it's like, okay, then we've got the interlinear. What's it based on? Is it based on a text by Unitarian? Is it based on a text by people who, Carlo Martini, Bruce Metzger. Who are these people? Does Melissa know who these people are? Has she studied into them? George Vance Smith, does she know who that is? So these versions are based upon that. So it's a bit like, sometimes over the years, people have found that certain elements can give you, cancer or something like that. And so just say you were cooking on some sort of, pan, and it was giving you cancer, okay? And you didn't know about that, but you're just using it. But once you know about it, it's like you throw the thing out and you get something that's not giving you cancer. You know what I mean? And so just say, for example, there was some sort of metal alloy that they just made all the pots out of, and I don't know, Teflon, whatever. I'm only just saying this. I don't even know about all those theories. But just say there was something sprayed on these pans that wasn't good for you. Well, they're cooking up something and it's different. But the thing is, not only that, but it's not even made well. You go into the kitchen and have a really good look at these versions, and many times there's huge compromise. The NASB Reader's Edition that's just come out, with Jennifer Knust being one of the main principal editors, she is basically Bart Ehrman in a dress. She is very prolific in writing books advocating for the LBGT community. She says the Bible never condemns homosexuality and never even speaks about homosexuality in the Bible. So if you have a same-sex relationship, that's fine. So she's one of the main principal editors of the new Bibles coming out. So I've seen a few people go, "Oh, that's not right. We shouldn't have that." But it's sort of like biting the hand that feeds, because a lot of these Bibles are sort of coming out, Logos Bible software. And when you look at Logos Bible software, they have the Catholic edition Verbum, which are both from Faith Life. It's a huge compromise, isn't it? When people have, Mark Ward gets on there and says, get rid of your King James, you get these other ones, and for $10,000 you can get the whole Logos system, sort of thing. And the thing is, people will say, we've got a glut of Bibles. Well, why do they have all this? You know what I mean? And people like, just open 4 or 5 or 6, 7, 15, 100 Bibles and you'll get all these ideas. And it's like, and I've just shown you a few tiny little clicks on a web page, and it's like, just in comparison, these Bibles are corrupt. And so, okay, let's just continue.
This actually isn't a problem like how people think it is. Again, we have to consider how translation works within the confines of culture. Okay, so let's take Revelation 3:20 for an example. It says, "Behold, I stand outside and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and dine with them." Now, to most of us listening, that sounds really straightforward. However, I had a missionary friend give me a different perspective on this, on how they might translate this a little differently and why. He was in a small village where it's customary in this village where if someone knocks on your door, your house is about to be broken into and you have a few minutes to get out. So instead of people knocking on doors in their custom and culture, they have it where if you're friendly and you're coming to visit, you stand outside the gate of their yard and you call to the homeowner. So if there's a community of people who need a Bible, who consider this verse to be a threat instead of an invitation, you translate it accordingly. I stand outside the fence and call would make more sense. Now, let me put the brakes on here for just a second, because I need to break this down a little bit more on how something like this works. You have contextualization, right? Which is meeting people on a standard that they can understand, and having the Bible be understandable to their ears in that cultural mindset without compromising what the Bible says. So that's contextualizing versus syncretism, which is changing the Bible altogether and what it says to mix it with the culture in order to be more relevant and attractive. Having a syncretistic view and a contextualizing view are two different things. I have a feeling that missionaries will understand this more than most, but if you're trying to reach an unreached people group or teaching the gospel to a culture that's unfamiliar with Jesus, it's wise and even necessary to understand them so you can be understood. So if the culture that you're primarily reaching is Muslim or Buddhist, for example, you wouldn't become a Muslim to win the Muslim. You wouldn't be a practicing Buddhist to win the Buddhist. You would remain a devoted Christian and explain things in a way that they would understand. I have a personal example of this. As some of you know, when I first started in ministry, it was a counter-cult ministry, mainly to Jehovah's Witnesses. This religion, by all means, is a cult. I have an entire series on them if you want to check it out. It's in the description. But they have their own language, so to speak, and meanings for things that they understand. There are hot button words that are very unique to a Jehovah's Witness, and there are triggering words that are unique to a Jehovah's Witness. Some lingo that they use that's unique to them is torture stake instead of cross, undeserved kindness instead of grace, shunned, Jehovah's organization, soul sleep, Armageddon, anointed class, other sheep, and so much more that are unique to this religion. A devoted Jehovah's Witness will, number one, either have no idea what I'm talking about or what I mean when I'm using certain Christian terms, or number two, they'll mentally and emotionally shut down because they're taught to. If I bring up anything like the Trinity, holidays, say anything negative about the governing body, that's a trigger for them. They will shut down on you. And I'm very mindful of my words and what I bring up with them and how I do it. So there was a long stretch of time where I was meeting with a group of Jehovah's Witnesses in my home many, many years ago. And the terms that I used were terms that they would understand. And in one instance, for example, I asked a woman, in an act of undeserved kindness, on this side of Armageddon, did Jesus take your sins on the torture stake? That simple sentence was so profound to her, like she had never heard that before. The very condensed version of this is that Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that Jesus took all their sins, especially their personal sins, that they have to work off through doing good works through the organization. They do not believe you can have a personal relationship with Jesus. Like, you don't talk to him, you don't pray to him. So to hear that he would do something so personal planted a very important seed with her. So this is an example of contextualization. Now, probably one of the best examples of syncretism can be found right in the Bible in 2 Kings chapter 17. It says they worshiped the Lord, great, but they also served their own gods in accordance with the customs of the surrounding nations. So they didn't deny God, they just took them and like, oh, we'll just add you to the rest of the stuff that we believe. Sound familiar? A modern day example of this is New Age or pop Christianity, where you just sort of pick and choose what works for you and discard what doesn't. And another more controversial, more recent example of this is the He Gets Us campaign. That's a fantastic example of syncretism, where you're not just using the language to reach people, but you're rejecting biblical elements of Christianity to welcome the things of the world in order to be more attractive to the world. And a good way to know the difference between the two is that one seeks to please God, while the other seeks to please man. When you see humanity as just like God, then you're going to please man under the guise of pleasing God. Speaking of which, this is a great segue to see which Bible translations to avoid.
Okay, so she's gone back to the Bible translation issue. So I just thought I'd let that run because I was going to cut it out, but there's certain things that she says and you won't understand later on why she's saying it. So
been around my channel for any amount of time, you might already know what's about to go down in this part of the video. Here is a really good way to remember what translations to avoid. If you ever come across a translation that is independently translated by one person.
Independently translated by one person. So you'd have to throw the Tyndale Bible out and most probably the Coverdale Bible. A lot of foreign language Bibles have been done by one person. Say the Henry Martin Bible, that was the main one in India and Pakistan for the Urdu, Hindustani speaking people. And so you'd have to throw that one out. So millions and millions have become born again and read that Bible. So Wycliffe, throw him under the bus as well. Matthews, yes, I think I'm not sure exactly why this is a common thing. It's like a one-person translation is bad. I think it might be just a simplistic way of looking like at the message, or the what is it, the Passion Translation. Now, I actually went and saw, I can't remember his name now. I should just quickly look it up. Passion Translation, Bryan something. Here we are, straight away, the Passion Translation, the Heart of God. Yeah, it's got Bill Johnson endorsing this. It's off the wall. And I remember, it's got Bobby, I've got to show it. It's got Bobby Hixson, co-founder of Hillsong Church. I mean, you know, yeah, that they've left Hillsong because, Brian Hixson was, 40 minutes in another woman's room while he was drunk and on pills. So they kicked him out of the church. It's like, anyway, former co-founder of Hillsong. Yeah, great. Yeah, they covered up the rape of 14 boys. And it was, I was trying to expose this for years and years and years. And we rang up the Royal Commission here in Australia and got them investigated. And it came out 14 boys had been raped by the founder. So she's got the co-founder of Hillsong Church. But why not have Frank Hixson there and say, raped 14 boys? That was her father-in-law. And they covered it up. They've just covered this up for years. Anyway, that's not why I went here. But I just, if you should see me in a Christian bookshop, I just, I'm nearly gagging. Spiritually, I'm just gagging at everything. I'm just walking around going, oh, there's Benny Hinn and there's Joyce Meyer looking at me. I'm like, and then there's a Hillsong thing, and then there's, Promise Keepers, and there's Benny Hinn, and then there's Cry for a Dollar, and then there's just all this sea of stuff. And I'm just like, I'll just stick to the Bible, I think. Anyway, so the lead translator. So let's have a quick look. Brian, and Candace Simmons. So I actually went and saw Brian Simmons. I got invited. Someone said, there's a Bible translator coming to our church. Let's go and have a look. And so it was one of the biggest churches in Brisbane. So Brian Simmons went there. He sort of talked about his Bible. He was just doing Song of Solomon's at the time, Song of Solomon. And then he went on to do a whole bunch of other stuff. And he's done, I think, the complete Bible now, which is pretty whack. And after the service, they were forehead slapping. People were on the ground getting, soaking and doing the whole Bethel thing. And I was like, okay. But I listened to what he had to say. And I was just like, you know what? I think this guy's off the wall. And sure enough, it's not hard to. But see, these guys are such low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's like, even someone, it's like people bringing out, like, say, Mike Winger brought out a thing about Benny Hinn. He's like, Benny Hinn's a bad guy. And it's like, I was saying that 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, even people in the world go, Benny Hinn's a full-on scam artist. They know. You don't have, you can have the discernment of a piece of wood on the ground and know that Benny Hinn is off the wall. You know what I mean? And so what I find with some of these, the Mirror translation, the Passion Translation, the New World Translation, it's like, you just sort of stay in the sky's blue. I mean, one of the readings in the Passion Translation was, I'll send you, the Paraclete, I'll send you a comforter, but it actually had in his edition, I'll send you another savior. And, knowing that there's, a whole group of people in the Middle East who believe that the Paraclete was a certain individual who wrote, we didn't actually write it, but, who was very instrumental in the Quran, called Muhammad. And so the Paraclete, they believe that that's him. So I'll send you another savior. It's like, what are you doing? Why would you have that? A comforter, sure, helper, maybe with the New King James, but it's like, anyway, let's continue.
One religion or is sectarian. That's your red flag.
So one religion or is sectarian. So if you're a whole bunch of Baptists, because there are plenty of Bibles that are just done by Baptists or done by Methodist community, or sometimes like in Papua New Guinea, you've got 840 languages up there. When missionaries go up there, sometimes they're part of the the new tribes mission, or they're part of Wycliffe, or whatever. So you've got to be ecumenical you got to have everyone on board with you. You can't say no. We like our group. I just, some of these standards are just not reality for everyone everywhere. So why would it be for us as well?
Throw it in the garbage. These are
throw the Wycliffe, Tyndale, Coverdale, Matthews Bible
translations that are not done by scholars or people who know the language.
I mean, you got to be a bit more specific,
or specialize in textual criticism. What that is that's prioritizing what the text says and means in its original language and draws the meaning from the text from the perspective of the author. But instead, these other translations create a translation that's created to fit their worldview and beliefs. Some examples of this are the Passion Translation, the New World Translation of the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Joseph Smith translation, and some would even say the Message translation is a little...
these are like garbage. If you had a bin and you had, at the top, it was just out of date food, and it went down to just like, rats eating just the bottom of the barrel stuff. They're talking about the bottom of the barrel stuff, where we're sort of like pointing out NIV has this bad reading here. Yes, not everywhere, but just here in a lot of places. And so anyway,
a little bit sus. The problem is that really anybody can get together and make a Bible, and if you have enough people following you thinking you're someone special because you have some sort of unique connection to God, then that's a recipe for you to probably find something to change in the Bible that you disagree with. There are a lot more resources in the description for you to check out, including why the Passion Translation belongs in your trash can. There's also some resources on how we got the Bible and why you can trust it. Now, let me pivot for just a second. In another vein of this topic of translations to avoid, another thing I want to mention is about the King James Bible.
Here we go.
I first became a Christian, I was told to only ever read the King James Bible.
Now, I would say whoever told her that probably cared for her because they had probably done their homework and seen all these deletions and changes and probably knew of the Unitarian influence on the text underlying it, probably knew that Jesuits in line to be a pope, like Carlo Martini, was one of the main guys behind the Nestle Alarm text. And yeah, it's like good advice. Now, if you couldn't read the old King James, if you did struggle that much with it, at least go to a New King James. At least, you know what I mean? Like that. That's sort of like, that's the advice that I'd give you. If people talk about readability and they just struggle with readability, at least go there, because at least you got the vast majority of words are in there. Now, unfortunately, no one the 130 translators who worked on the New King James, not one of them was a Textus Receptus advocate. They were either critical text or majority text. And so, like James Price, the main guy from the Old Testament, he was a critical text advocate. Fasted, the main guy, the main editor for the whole Bible, he did a majority text Greek edition. That's why it has critical text notes, a majority text note. And so this is the problem. In the New King James, they've designed it to basically be like a bridge Bible to modern corruptions, because you're reading along and it's like, well, this verse is omitted in this, in the NU omit this, and that means Nestle Alarm United Bible Society text, or the M omits this, the majority text omits this. So even in their study Bible, they say that you can choose whatever reading you want. So it's choose your own adventure Bible. If you want the last 12 verses of Mark to be in there, fine. If you don't, fine. If you think, these signs will follow those who believe in my name, they'll do this. If you don't want that in your Bible, you don't need it. You can delete them. You can probably even get there and cross it out, match the underlying Greek texts, So Derek McClure says, hey, Nix, what's your opinion of the KJV ER easy read? I've got no problem with people wanting to update language at all. And I never have, being involved with the KJV 2016 edition and the 2023 edition. The KJV Easy Reader, I have found some places where I wouldn't agree I think it was like on the issue of Passover, Easter, where they were sort of like, no, it should say Passover, which, you know, people like James White have jumped to that conclusion because they believed that Passover was, Easter was a pagan word. So that's a lot of the reason why people have rejected that word. They haven't really studied it out themselves, not understanding that Easter means resurrection. It comes from the German Oster, which comes from Auferstehung, and so it means resurrection in German. The Luther Bible used Oster, and so in understanding that the only time Easter appears, meaning resurrection, is after the resurrection in Acts. Every other time is before the resurrection. Now, there are 2 other places in the New Testament, but they're historically talking about the Passover. And so the only place it's warranted is once in Acts chapter 12, verse 4. So I've done a big study into that. If you go to easterau.com, I've done an article on that. And so even like Answers in Genesis, Jonathan Safadi from Creation Ministries International, they used my material back when I wrote it. I wrote it in 2005, the first article there, and they've used my material for many years to promote the whole idea of it not being a pagan festival. And most people have come full circle. Like even Wes Huff now, that's part of his whole thing, going around telling people it's not pagan. Where, you know, only 10 years ago I was told by James White that if I believed that I was a Ruckmanite. And he just straight out said I was a Ruckmanite. I was like, hang on. And I was actually reading the New King James. It must have been 2008. So that's a long time ago. But anyway, so from her website, I believe the scripture of the Old and New Testament are inspired by God and inerrant in the original text. Scripture is the supreme and final authority of faith and life. Yeah, well, it's just like, which one then? So this is the whole video. Why are there so many Bible translations and which is the best one? It's like, okay, so let's let it continue.
I was taught and told that all translations besides the King James were evil and demonic.
Okay, so she's obviously being told by someone who has not brought it, you know, like she was saying about the Jehovah's Witnesses, you got to use palatable terms because people who have been deceived and they're in a group where you say certain things, it triggers them because they've already been gaslit that if you say a certain word, you know, Trinity or whatever, that they go on their march and their brain starts ticking over. And so in the same way, some you know, King James only people, TR people, they can be very abrupt and they can say, you know, these versions are from Satan, you've got to stay away from, you know, and just be full on, where I would probably use more palatable terms and say, you know, the King James is more accurate, these other Bibles are inaccurate, and just point out where there's mistakes. So, but one thing is, I used to think that if you pointed out where there's errors in these modern Bibles, people would go, oh my gosh, the ESV has an error here. It has a historical error or a genealogical error or a geographical error. Jesus goes to the wrong town. And there's so many errors in these Bibles. Like it's almost, you could spend forever going through all these errors in these modern Bibles. But I thought if you pointed out those errors and you sort of went, yeah, see, 1 + 1 = 3 in that version, but it should equal 2, you know, and look at the genealogy. Look, it's wrong. They've got the wrong people in there. And, you know, that people would go, oh, wow, I'll go with the King James. But they actually go, well, it's wrong in the originals. That's what I've realized. People actually think the originals were that bad. I didn't realize it. Me being just ignorant and just going along thinking, well, I'm you know, faithfully pointing out where the ESV's got a problem here and showing, you know, where there's mistranslation and proving that. People go, but all Bibles have mistakes. And you're just there going, oh, no, no, they don't. Not the King James. Have you ever read into it? And then they go, oh, you're one of those guys. You're in a cult, you know. So obviously she's already been, you know, someone's not used, you know, like she said about the Jehovah's Witnesses, don't use certain terminology around them. Someone wasn't soft with her. But the thing is, you know, she should be mature enough now to know that you're probably not going to get everything nice and soft. And if you don't want to behave like a cultist, you should really just go, well, I don't really care who said it. Is it true or not? I've actually had a Jehovah's Witness say things to me when I'm out witnessing to them and, telling them that they're in a cult and all the rest of it. And they said things to me, and I went, hang on, that's actually true. That goes against what my church is teaching. So it was actually to do with killing other people. And they were saying, your church promotes the military, and it did, big time. A lot of the leaders were all former military guys and all the rest of it. And they were saying, so, if you went to Indonesia as a missionary and we had to go to war with them, would you shoot the other? And that what they were saying, I was like, yeah, you got a point. I didn't let them know that. But I studied into pacifism, and I'm like, well, the Fox's Book of Martyrs is full of pacifists. They didn't really start their own army and go out killing people, but I know that, I've upset the military-industrial complex mindset of many people, and some people are sitting there and they've got their revolver out right now and they're about to shoot the screen. But, that, to me, I learned something from, broken clocks, right, twice a day. So, but anyway, I'm just being totally honest and upfront with you guys.
They were New Age translations, and I remember in particular the...
Okay, so Derek says, I've gone through all your Easter material and I thoroughly enjoyed it and could not agree more. Thanks for the insight about the KJV ER. I will enjoy it just for the general word updates. Yeah, and so, I would read through it. I would compare it to. Sometimes it's really good if you can like sometimes the New King James and the King James have pretty much the same. Like you can go through almost a whole chapter and it's almost the same. But sometimes you go through a chapter and there's 10 places that are wrong. And you're like, what's going on here? Specifically in the Old Testament, the MEV, the New King James, is really bad because they're going to the Septuagint, they're going to Sumerian Pentateuch, they're going to Targums, they're going to all sorts of different things and getting different readings. So it's not just Masoretic text.
NIV was particularly evil. And
well, I guess the NIV, she's saying she was 16 years old back then. I don't know how old she is, but that was one of the main Bibles that came out. And so, and the NIV does have lots and lots of words missing. Now, I've got a book here. Now, I don't agree with everything in this book. This is Serious Omissions in the NIV Bible. But I've had this for a long, long time. But it's mostly just... they've just got these comparison charts, and I'll just show you some of them. There's some other stuff which is a bit sort of kooky King James stuff, about people translating as losing their voice and all this sort of stuff. I don't know about that, but it just says things like, I'm really just struggling to do this. Okay, so what do we got there? It minimizes man's sins. So made his life a guilt offering. King James made his soul an offering for sin. Christ our Passover lamb has been crucified. And then it says Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Sorry, I said crucified, it says sacrificed. But the for us is taken out. So just looking at these, the gospel of Christ. And when you go through a lot of this, the NIV has shrine prostitute, the KJV has sodomite. Male prostitutes, take up the cross is omitted, and so I've known for years about the omissions in the NIV, and this guy puts it under the headings of NIV changes salvational verses, it teaches Unitarianism, it denies the omnipresence of Jesus with John 3:13 omitted, which is in heaven. And all you have to do is just look at the Lord's Prayer. I mean, this is amazing. Look at the Lord's Prayer here. It says, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So he's boldened the words which are omitted. Our which are in heaven, they're omitted. It says, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven, omitted. And then, but deliver us from evil is omitted. So here in Luke, you just have all these omissions And that's in the Lord's Prayer. You know what I mean? It's not just some obscure thing in Chronicles, or that's like people have been praying this for years and years and years and years, and then it's just, anyway, let's continue.
Ironically, as an ex-New Ager, ex-New Thoughter, even now, I can't really understand how that connection was made, but it's pretty crucial to point out that language has changed since 1611. So
it's sort of a bit mocking there. Since 1611, language has changed. We know that. Well, even people like D.A. Waite, he had the defined King James, the King James text, and he would have footnotes where it explained archaic terminology. The Trinitarian Bible Society, the one who removed themselves from the Bible Society because there's so many Unitarians back in 1831, they've done a very similar type of Bible. And so it's not like it's a mystery and we don't understand that there are hard words in the King James to understand. There are people out there saying, no, nothing's hard to understand. And, then I just find a verse and go, well, what does this mean? And they're like, if you put them on the spot, if they're behind the computer, they'll come up with an answer. But put them on the spot and usually they're struggling. And then you got people like Gail Riplinger coming out and basically saying every letter, like the letter S means a snake and all this sort of stuff, which is, it's going way too far. And so most people have rejected her type of material, but there are people out there influenced by her who believe that the King James has a built-in dictionary. I don't adhere to that. I did get one of her books and I tried the built-in dictionary thing and it simply didn't work. That was one of the problems. It didn't work. If it worked, I'd use it. But she was saying don't use dictionaries. But then she actually used the methodology of the Kabbalah to make out that every word means, like every letter means something, which is part of the Hebrew language, and it's called Edenics, which is a real proper linguistic science. But if you look at English, the letter K just is a K. It doesn't mean anything. It's not like a rattlesnake or something, or an I, or, we say A for apple. We don't say A is an apple. Where Hebrew, they say Aleph. Aleph means an ox. That's the name for an ox. You say there's an Aleph over there. So all their letters have meaning. So it's a completely different language, and that's why I believe it's a language of God. So if you type in Edenics or go to the Ancient Hebrew Research Center, they've got quite a lot on this. And this is where a lot of the Kabbalah stuff comes from, because it's just, even Davidson, who is just absolute bog standard sort of Hebrew stuff, probably one of the better Hebrew guys of about 150 years ago. But he has, the Aleph means an ox. He mentions all this. But in English, that doesn't appear. And people are like, oh, we've got this hidden dictionary and all this sort of stuff. It's a modern thing. It's only been around since mid-90s. And Bryan Ross, if you type in his website, Grace Life Bible, and type in Riplinger hidden dictionary, whatever, you'll get the videos that have just come out like in the last few weeks. And lots of people have rejected this. The Dean Burgon Society, D.A. Waite, they were coming against this in the 90s. And so Derek says, I feel like Melissa is another poor soul who's had her intelligence affected by her education. Yeah, I mean, it would be hard. She's definitely got a very popular YouTube. She wants to sort of stay in that line where, you're in the middle. You don't want to say things wrong, and you don't want to offend people too. See, the thing is, you probably got the Jerks for Jesus guys coming on there and saying, hey, you don't use the King James, you're cursed, and your parents are this and that. You're probably gay, and people say that. I've seen them, and I'm like, you guys are jerks. I mean, Stephen Edison's a Textus Receptus guy, King James guy. I mean, he wants Obama to be dead. He's praying Obama dies. Who does that as a Christian? You know what I mean? Do you even know the basics of the Bible? So anyway, let's continue.
A huge language barrier, along with being a 16-year-old brand new Christian, didn't exactly set me up for success with regular Bible reading. It actually set me up for failure. Now, many of you watch.
So reading a Bible with 2,900 less words, that say things like, if you get angry, you're in danger of judgment, where the King James says if you get angry without a cause, you're in danger of judgment, so without a good reason. So if you just get angry, you're like, oh, I'm in danger of hellfire, I'm in danger of judgment. But then you read about Jesus getting angry with the Pharisees. So there's a contradiction. So you'd rather read something that's understandable, but with contradictions. Now, I understand when, you're 16 years old, obviously, and you've never read the King James, that's why I say, look, at least just go to a Textus Receptus edition Bible and start there. Don't go into the Westcott and Hort mess. But see, this is the problem. They're jumping from, it's unreadable, to just jump straight into the fire, A. Hannah says, but these same people will bring up a Greek and Hebrew word and start explaining it to people who don't know Greek and Hebrew. But then when we say you can't understand, then we say, but then also say we cannot understand early modern English. This is one of the things. You'll get Wes Huff there, or even Mark Ward. He'll say, people can't understand Holt, and they can't understand Chambering, and, and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, what? We have to use a dictionary. And then he's doing like poetry, like he's reading Beowulf or something, and he's like, for thou shalt not give thou. And he's like, most people who are watching the channel not understand a word that he's saying then? It's like, he's like, I just wanted you to bring it down to the ploughboy and the boy on the bus. But then he's speaking in this language, and obviously, most of the time they're recorded in a way where he's got the thesaurus out, and he's going through and looking for terminology to use to impress people. And but and then he's like, the King James it's too difficult. And anyway, look, I understand for some people it is, but don't jump into the Westcott and Hort land. Don't jump into the majority text land. Stay with the King James stream of Bibles.
Watching might already know this, but there's something in particular I want to point out about the King James Bible and the New King James Bible versus other translations. But if you compare modern translations with the King James Bible, you'll find that there are additions in the King James Bible that...
So notice, it's not omissions now, it's additions. So all through the Reformation, Martin Luther and Tyndale and Erasmus and Stephanus and Beza and the King James guys and Calvin and all these other people, and they all had all these extra things. Like, it's like having the Apocrypha in there. And so, and even if you grab a modern Bible, the last 12 verses of Mark are still there, but they're in brackets usually, or there's a marginal note saying it shouldn't be in there. James White says they're Gnostic. Peter Gurry says they're apocryphal. So if you got like 12 verses there that are like reading the Apocrypha, so it's a bit like, sometimes you're reading a Catholic Bible or something. It's like, what? It's got like 3 extra chapters of Daniel. Ugh. And you sort of read it and it's a song of Daniel or something. It's like, this is really weird. This is strange. But what about the last 12 verses? What about the pericope adulterae, the woman caught in adultery? Should that be in there? And so this is the thing. Some modern Bibles have these. Most of them have it in there, but they double bracketed in the Greek. And in the margin, it says it shouldn't be in there. What else shouldn't be in there? Why have they got... people are like, well, they shouldn't have had the Apocrypha in the Reformation Bibles. Well, they had them in there, and oftentimes, like, people knew that, because the word Apocrypha means of doubtful authenticity. So the Roman Catholics, they thought that these were authentic, but the Protestants, they rejected these, and they said these are corrupt. Like, even King James himself said, I reject the Apocrypha because I'm not a papist. So he rejected the Apocrypha, but they put it in there. Now, they needed a faithful translation of the Apocrypha for their apologetic. When you're debating Roman Catholics, you want an authentic text. It was well translated, and so they knew exactly what it said. It was only a few years after that they were actually printing King James editions without the Apocrypha. So the King James also had like 50 pages of genealogy at the front with pictures and everything. 50 pages done by Hugh Broughton, Hugh Broughton was one of the biggest critics of the King James. And so 50 pages by a King James critic in the, so there were things like, to find Easter forever, calendars and, prayer days and all this sort of stuff, and Church of England sort of, liturgy days, and to find Whit Sunday and do this and do that. And it's all in there. And they have the Apocrypha there. All that stuff is just fluff. What we're really looking at is the original Hebrew-based Bible and the Greek Bible, Greek-based, English Bible. And so, but now they have these modern Bibles, and it's like, well, they've got these apocryphal readings in them all of a sudden, added words. See, this is that if you went back in time 150 years and you said to someone, hey, you've got all these added words in there, they'd say, no, sorry. No, this is the Bible. But things have changed. And why have they changed? Because of the influence of liberals, because of Enlightenment philosophy creeping into textual criticism, because of Unitarian influence, anti-Trinitarian influence, and because of manuscripts of doubtful authenticity, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. If you just get rid of those documents, pretty much you're left with just sort of like, well, what's the other alternative? Textus Receptus. So that's why they've got these two. That's what you've got. That's why you've got 99.999% of all the manuscripts have the last 12 verses are marked there. Two don't. Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. So they go with them. And they're like everything. So every Christian pretty much in the world forever, up until the Bibles just started coming out recently, every Christian has had apocryphal readings that we're like, oh, I didn't know the last 12 verses of Mark shouldn't have been there. I didn't know the Pericope Adulterae was just some marginal gloss that was just put in there.
Don't appear in other translations. Well, the short version is that when the translators were putting together the King James Bible, they only had access to a certain number of manuscripts.
So this is the usual story, that Erasmus only had a handful of manuscripts and all this. So there's so much misinformation about just Erasmus. Let's look at it this way. So Erasmus, he was a scribe. He was an Augustinian monk like Luther. He used to copy Latin Bibles. That's how he knew about scribal errors. That's how he became so good at Latin. He became the best Latin scholar of Europe. And then he turned around and became the best Greek scholar of Europe. So what he did, he went and lived in Venice with Aldus Manutius. Now, Aldus Manutius, you might know him. He invented the semicolon. Now, he was one of the main guys who basically saved the Greek history, because he was printing so many Greek books and documents back then, and it was really hard to print these. You needed 1,000 characters. But he was focused on Greek. He had, because Constantinople had fallen in about 1453, and so the Ottomans had taken over there. And the Ottoman Empire started, 400 years of Ottoman Empire. And you had Aldus Manutius, that there were about 5,000 Greek refugees in Venice at the time. So he had his own Byzantine school filled with Greek scholars. Who came along and was one of the main guys there? Erasmus. So Erasmus worked with Aldus Manutius for 9 months as a proofreader in his Greek printery. Erasmus did books like Adagas, which was 3,000 proverbs, Greek proverbs. So if you found, like, how many people do you know who could just find 3,000 English proverbs? That would be hard. He found them in Greek, and he'd already done that work when he went to Aldus, because he did another 2,000, had 5,000 Greek proverbs. So what was he reading to find all these? Greek manuscripts. When you're reading that many documents, you find Bibles, you find letters. Printing hadn't really even taken off. And so what were they reading? They were reading manuscripts. He would have been reading Latin manuscripts, Greek manuscripts, everything he could get his hands on. He was scouring the libraries of Europe, going around. And libraries just don't give you a manuscript. If you go to the Vatican Library, you don't leave there going, hey, they just given me this manuscript I can take home. They didn't back then either. So he would take his notebook and write down, oh, there's a variant here. This has got, quickly looking at things, scanning things, going to his favorite verses and going, oh, that one has it. Well, the other one didn't. Oh, that's in the margin. And taking note of all these things for years and years and years and years. Then in 1516, then he printed his edition. And he did 5 editions. And so by the end of it in 1516, 1519, 1522, 1527, 1535 edition, he had a team of scholars working with him. The Complutensian Polyglot had already done an edition in 1514, 2 years earlier. And then when you look at Stephanus and the work that he did, and he listed a whole bunch of manuscripts that he had, that he was looking at. Then you had Theodore Beza. He has manuscripts we don't even know where they are today. They're just lost in history. But he had old manuscripts, like Curtius Beza is like 5th century. That's like dated to like 450 or something like that. And so there were lots and lots and lots of manuscripts. And we, like Dan Wallace said, we lost 1 million biblical manuscripts just in World War II alone. So we're actually not gaining manuscripts and finding more. We're actually losing manuscripts. And so back then they didn't have books. They weren't all printed yet. That they had manuscripts everywhere. So they were used to reading these manuscripts and studying, but then they fade away. They get burnt. A flood comes and destroys a town, and all the manuscripts get wet and they're gone. Fire, war. People thinking they're valuable for their art and they steal them, they bury them, they get killed. This type of thing was happening. But see, the thing is, the King James translators didn't have that many manuscripts. No, what they had was the Byzantine manuscripts. They had Beza. They looked at Vaticanus. The only real thing that is of weight that they didn't have was Sinaiticus. And Dean John William Burgon said Sinaiticus is deeply corrupted. He said Vaticanus and Sinaiticus are 2 of the most deeply corrupted manuscripts on earth. And so experts have looked at these. Unitarians love it. The Jehovah's Witnesses, they do pilgrimages to the British Library. So Codex Sinaiticus, because they bought a lot of Sinaiticus from the Russians, because Uspensky actually came and got some of that. Tischendorf got most of it. But Uspensky, he had a lot of it in the in the Russian libraries. And so when the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution happened, they needed money, so they actually sold that to the British Library and got a bunch of money for it. And so that's sitting opposite the White Album in the British Museum. And Jehovah's Witnesses do pilgrimages there because that's the text, that's the Unitarian-based text that they're so glad that people have just focused on all of a sudden, because England was flooded with Unitarian concepts. The Bible Society became Unitarian pretty much. That's why they had the Trinitarian Bible Society, having a distinction. Westcott and Hort had George Vance Smith, a Unitarian, working on their text, the basis for all these modern Bibles. Joe Peeler says, watching from the beginning as I can see her video on my feed. Aldus Manutius also developed the italic type as well. Fun fact. Yes, very intelligent guy. There's a really good video. If you just type in Aldus Manutius on YouTube, there's like an hour-long video of a guy who's like a historian for Aldus. And you would think this guy is like, he's like the Einstein of printing and everything. And yeah, Erasmus was his good friend. He lived with him for like 9 months and was a proofreader for him. It's like, yeah, just so happens that Erasmus, was there. Joe Peeler says, yes, the underlying text that is translated from is the main issue, not translation. I'm not sure the average pew sitters know this. Yes, and I think Jay's like playing catch up, so don't worry. I often play catch up and comment, so that's fine. Usually I find if you watch my videos 1.25, they are a lot better. You can have a few good manuscripts that reflect that mass of good manuscripts and reading. What good is it to have all the junk manuscripts? And this is the thing. They're like the apologists lie to you. Okay, I'm not saying she's lying, but I believe that she's just parroting material that she's heard. Apologists will say, we have like 5,200, according to Myths and Mistakes, or 5,800 manuscripts or whatever. And Peter Gurry's like, oh, I don't know. So we got 5,500, let's just say, manuscripts, and they're like, we've got this embarrassment of riches. We got so many manuscripts. Oh, we've got all these manuscripts. This is delightful. This is great. So many manuscripts, all the rest of it. And so, if you're out there and you hear, I've street preached this type of thing, about the Bible can be trusted. We have so many manuscripts that back up the Bible, and people are like, wow, this guy knows his stuff. And so if I was a critical text guy and I've said to someone, hey, you might be an atheist, you think the Bible's full of mistakes and contradictions, but hey, no, we've got this embarrassment of riches, so many manuscripts and all the rest of it. And then they go to my church and they think, well, I'm gonna find out about these embarrassment of riches. And so then they join the church, and then it's like, so where's the embarrassment of riches? It's like, well, we don't really use all that. So I know I said, 5,500 manuscripts, but we only use about 50, or really we use 2, Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. So, but what about the other 5? You were saying these big numbers, 5,000. It's like, yeah, but we throw them in the bin. They're Byzantine. Who wants to read a Byzantine manuscript? That's like the Textus Receptus type of thing. We like Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. So, well, these must be really good. And it's like, yeah, they have all these massive differences, 3,000 differences just in the Gospels. So Westcott and Hort had to actually fuse these 2 together to create their never seen before ever text. So these were not copied. They weren't known in the world. They're just like aberrations of history. And they've gotten these 2 and put them together, fused them together, and it's like, there we've got our text. And it's like a Unitarian's there on the voting committee going, yeah, 1 John 5:7, get rid of that. God was manifest in the flesh, get rid of that. And he wrote a book about it saying the doctrines are changed. And that's one of their main mantras, doctrines aren't changed. And a Unitarian who worked on the text says doctrines are changed. So someone's lying. And, the whole embarrassment of riches thing. So someone comes to your church and they're like, you said there was an embarrassment of riches there. So people, apologetics ministers are lying to people to get them in, to get them on favor with them. But at the end of the day, they were just honest. It's like, look, let's just follow Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, because that's what these Bibles are doing. The last 12. Listen to me very carefully. The last 12 verses, 12 entire verses of Mark, are only omitted because of 2 manuscripts. Vaticanus and Sinaiticus don't have them. They have the room for them. You can pen it all in there. There's blank columns there. But they stop at verse 9. Every other manuscript has it. Like 1,654, I think, was the last count. And so you're basically saying everyone's been deceived. Instead of saying Vaticanus and Sinaiticus is bad, let's turn it all around and say all the rest are bad and these 2 are good. That's what's happened. Everything's been turned on its head. And who by? Like faithful, Orthodox, Bible-believing, God-loving. No, people who are heretical, Unitarian influence, Roman Catholic, Jesuit influence. And so, this isn't conspiratorial. I'll just go Google. Let's just go to Google. Because I heard a pastor say that, it was Matthew Everhard. He's like, you can't always find, good answers on the internet. It's like, yes, you can. there's stuff everywhere on the internet. There's really good information. Anyway, so let's look up Greek Bible. Okay, and we'll go to Wikipedia. Okay, we'll go to the Septuagint one first because that just came up. But let's go to, no, let's just type in Greek New Testament. Okay. The Novum Testamentum Graece. Okay, so Everhard Nessel, Kurt, so you can find out who these guys are. Let's have a look at Kurt Aland. Oh, here he is with the Orthodox guy. You know what I mean? I've got pictures of him with the Pope. Who are these guys? You know what I mean? Let me just run through some pictures because I was collecting pictures for my little video clip that I've got. Now I've just got to find it. That's all. For video, here we go. Yes, here is Bruce Metzger. Well, no, Kurt Aland. Kurt and Barbara Aland with the Pope. No, it's called the Nestle Alarm text. Why is he with the Pope? Is he saying, hey, Pope, you really need to repent. You're the leader of a cult. It doesn't look like he's saying that to me. Look, these are Bibles. The clear word, the message, the Bible, Living Bible, New Testament and Psalms, some edition, New English Bible. The New English Bible actually in Psalm 22 says they hacked off my hands and my feet instead of they pierced my hands and my feet. That's great. Nice prophecy there, guys. New Testament, new translation. Yeah, look at all you could. This is the smorgasbord that they want you to get into. You know, God's Word translation, the CEV, name the acronym, ABC, the Webster's Bible. Well, that's more like the King James than most, but let's have a look. Okay, that's Hort, the New Testament in the original Greek by Westcott and Hort, by Philip Schaff. He's a liberal. If you don't know who Philip Schaff is, look him up. James White, King James. So these are just some pictures. That's Kurt Aland there, you know, the Nestle Aland text. So that's him, Aland. Just having a smoke. These are some of the guys who are on that committee. That's Bruce Metzger there. I think that's Kurt Aland and a few other guys. So there's, I think that's Kurt Aland, and he's with the Pope. So the guys from NIV, the Revised Standard Version. Yeah, here's one of those thought for thought, word for word things. That seems to be the theme of this video. Westcott. Okay, so that's about it. Let's just shut that down and let's just continue on. I think you're getting the gist. I can just rabbit trail, but here we go.
And as time went on, older manuscripts and much more of them were discovered. Now,
older manuscripts and much more were discovered. So the thing is, with the dating of manuscripts, many times it's an art form. So I showed you that Barbara Aland and Kurt Aland, they were with the Pope. Now they, in one of their books, they probably on every third or fourth page, they talk about this manuscript called Archaic Mark, because they were very excited to find that Vaticanus had been a lot of the readings had been copied in a 13th century Byzantine manuscript, and they were excited, like, wow, because Vaticanus is just sort of like a nothing manuscript, and it doesn't have children. It's just genealogically dead, until Westcott and Hort sort of fused it back together with Sinaiticus. And Archaic Mark, 13th century manuscript, they were saying it's so great that we got this link to Vaticanus. But then people started getting sus on this manuscript, and they chemically dated it to the modern era because it had Prussian blue ink in it. So they found that it was a modern day forgery. But the aliens were sucked in by this manuscript because the dating of a lot of these manuscripts is not as accurate as we would like to think. Many of these manuscripts, it's an art form. People are just going by the way the letters are. They're saying, well, this in between 300 and 400 they wrote in this style, but someone could write in that same style like 500 years later. So you've really got to chemically date these manuscripts, and most of them haven't been chemically dated. So it's like with evolution, there can be people pushing things back or forward or whatever they're doing, but we know that there are some things they've dated as thousands and thousands of years old, and it's not. We know there's art forgeries, and they have to deal with this type of stuff all the time. We should be chemically dating all these manuscripts. People are just saying these two manuscripts, they've exalted these two manuscripts above everything else in Christianity. And look at the problems that it's causing.
Now, no matter what you might think of James White, who I'm 60% sure can smile, he has a fantastic book on this called The King James Controversy that I think is probably one of the best explanations out there of why the King James is a good translation. But it
is a good translation. James White is like, the King James has all these poor readings, mistranslations. He's going through it saying he might be at one side of his mouth saying it's good, the other side of his mouth saying it's rubbish. White man speak with forked tongue.
It is not the elite translation, and it explains a lot of the supposed discrepancies.
Okay, so you pick anything out of here, and I will debate anyone in the world on this book. I've gone through this book. You can see where I've highlighted things, and and this is just a random page. I don't even know what it's talking about, but I'll just prove that it's wrong just on this one page. So let's just go here. Okay, so what's it talking about? Honorable. Okay, so it's readability. Angels, heavenly beings, or God. So it's showing you the difference between these modern Bibles. Look at this. King James has, for thou hast made him a little lower than the angels. New King James has the angels. NIV has the heavenly beings. ESV has the heavenly beings. NASB has God. You've made him a little lower than God, or the angels. And so that's a huge difference. And it says a very interesting difference in translation arises in the Old Testament. The NASB has God, and it says Elohim is used in each of these ways somewhere in the Old Testament. So the issue is one of interpretation more than translation. What makes this passage more significant than most, however, is that the writer to the Hebrews cites the passage as it appears in the Greek translation of the Old Testament known as the Septuagint. So here, these very people will say, don't have a translation usurping the Greek, okay? The King James doesn't usurp the Greek. And I think the same thing. I think the Greek and the English say the same thing, But they are projecting because their Septuagint translation of the Hebrew usurps the Hebrew. So they've gone to the God reading from a Septuagint, a translation. And so they're saying, these King James, well, and I know some people say, the English is better than the Greek, and people say all sorts of strange things, okay. But at the end of the day, they're doing that. They're projecting onto us that we're doing it when they're doing it. And so it says, the New Testament application should be made the norm from our understanding of the Old Testament's meaning. So it's like, don't translate it accurately, translate it from according to the Septuagint. So a translation overrides the New Testament originals and the Old Testament originals. And the Septuagint is hopelessly filled with errors. I mean, the book of Jeremiah is like a third shorter than the Masoretic text. It's off the wall. I mean, Methuselah lives 14 years after the flood in the LXX. So Derek says, "Oh, that's a cool fun fact about the italics with Aldus Manutius. Thanks at A. Hannah." Derek, there is a video about how Aldus saved civilization on YouTube. Pretty interesting. That's the one I was talking about. Really good. And any book about Aldus, you'll always be fascinated. You'll be like, this guy saved civilization. He was one of Erasmus's best friends. And so, he also did the Aldine translation. So it was in 1518. So they had the whole entire Greek Old Testament and the Greek New Testament. So it was the first entire Greek Bible in 1518. So these guys knew Greek, and they were revering Erasmus as like the main guy. So anyway, so I just sort of point out James White, straight away, and the thing is too, can you trust modern translations? Now, James White, he oftentimes is talking to all sorts of different people. I don't agree with, Stephen Anderson on much, but there are some things I agree with, just like I would agree with, Benny Hinn on some things, I guess, probably not. But he interviewed Stephen Anderson, and Stephen Anderson said to him, well, in the NIV, it says this and that. And James White went, hang on, don't think that I'm validating every reading in the NIV. I'm not. The NIV is a liberal translation. That's what James White said. A liberal translation. But this book is like, can you trust the modern versions with a question mark on the end? So you would be answering that and saying, well, I think you can trust them. But then he's saying it's a liberal translation. So why is he supporting a liberal translation? And then you look on the back, it's supported by John MacArthur, J.I. Packer, D.A. Carson, Hank Hengraft. He's left Protestantism for Greek Orthodox. But it just makes you wonder why doesn't he say that in his book? And you know what's really amazing? I was talking about 1 Timothy 3:16 before. Now, I know some people will go, oh, I'll prove him wrong, and they start trying to prove me wrong. Well, James White actually says in here that he agrees with Textus Receptus advocates. He agrees with Dean John William Burgon on that it should read as the Textus Receptus. So he's going against Dan Wallace and everyone else. So that's the thing. Where is the Bible then? It's in the mind of these scholars. They just make it up as they go. Or do we have a finalized word somewhere? Because can you imagine, I've come into your church. So where's the Bible? Oh, well, it's over there. There's the bookshelf like I showed you before of just all these Bibles. Which one's the best? You're not a King James only cultist, are you? You've got to believe in all of them. But this one's saying the opposite of this other one. This one's saying increase the joy. The other one's saying has not increased the joy. That's just New King James and Old King James example. Which one is it? Well, you're splitting hairs, I would want to know that. As a new Christian, people coming in from atheism want to know this sort of stuff. Let's continue.
Now, if you're interested to know more about this particular topic, I made an entire video about this, if the King James Bible is superior to other translations, and if every other translation out there is demonic and evil.
See, notice she's just jumping to these, little things. If the King James version is superior and every other version is demonic and satanic and just, it's like, no, let's just be realistic about this. Let's put all the emotion aside and go, okay, well, if the Lord's Prayer it just says Father instead of our Father which art in heaven. It just says Father. There's something wrong. If you're chopping out 12 verses a month, it's a different text. Why aren't you talking about that? Bring these examples up. Talk about this. Or are you just avoiding it? Because to me, if people won't talk about a topic and go in depth into it, then there's something to hide. Now, I'm giving Melissa, I think I called her Michelle before, so sorry about that. I think I'm giving Melissa the benefit of the doubt and just saying she's sort of getting a bit, hoodwinked by modern day apologetics ministers like James White and, Wes Huff and other people. And I'm not saying everything they say is wrong either. James White does a great job at exposing Mariolatry and Roman Catholic traditions and all that. But at the end of the day, he's completely wrong on his bibliology. And I can, if anyone wants to go through the King James only controversy, I actually thought what would be a really good thing to do is actually have open mic and just go through the James White book, chapter by chapter. Now, I probably wouldn't be able to read it online, but we could just sort of read through it and get the gist. Okay, this is his main argument, and talk about it. And talk about the things that are wrong in his book, and just go chapter by chapter. It might take a few years to go through the whole entire book, but at least then we can go, okay, let's point people to where, where we've exposed all of James White's material. Because I've often thought of writing a book against the King James only controversy. Now, I did Revelation 16:5, and I wrote that book, and it was 200 pages. It took a long time, and in the end, I was actually exhausted from it. Writing a book is hard work, But, and that was only like 5 pages. And I found so many errors in his book. Anyway, let's continue.
And going to bring demons in your house.
So someone's said that she's, you're going to join the New Age, or it's demonic, or you're going to have demons in your house or whatever. So I don't know where she's coming from with all that. Because, people who are logical, who have chosen to follow the Textus Receptus because it makes sense, because it's the text that has been received by all, in the Reformation period, there was the critical text was not there. Yet they like to say, which Textus Receptus was it? There's a tiny bit of difference between Erasmus's and this one and that one. It's like, but at least we had a text. You guys haven't had a text for 1,500 years. And then all of a sudden you had to fuse these two opposite manuscripts together to get this never seen before ShamWow text.
You're going to accidentally become a New Ager.
Yeah, if you don't read the King James, you're going to accidentally become a New Ager. Now, I know some people are saying that, but you just got to give the benefit of the doubt that not everyone's saying that. So I'll just overlook that and go, okay, well, maybe that's who you've been influenced by. I definitely wouldn't say you become a New Ager, but I would definitely say that John chapter 1, verse 18, with the only begotten God, is a Gnostic reading. And all you have to do is know a little bit about church history to understand about the controversy of the only begotten God. If you read through that, you'll go, yeah, this was a controversy. Why have they got that now in modern Bibles?
But overall, the King James is a good translation, and I recommend it if that's your jam. But if the King James makes your brain cells fist fight, let me recommend the English Standard Version.
Okay, with all the omissions, dozens and dozens of verses questioned, contradictions, the wrong genealogy. Let me just show you a few things. Let me just go, okay, ESV. Was it 1 Samuel 13? Now, actually, what I'll do, I'll go to KJV Today, kjvtoday.net. Go to that website. Now, let's have a quick look at 1 Samuel 13:1. Okay, just look at this parallel here. So she's saying, the King James is going to frizzle your brain. So it says Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel. Okay, Saul reigned for 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, and it continues. ESV, Saul was ... years old when he began to reign, and he reigned ... and 2 years over Israel. How old was Saul? He was ... It actually has the dots in the ESV. They don't know how to translate it. King James know. King James guys were fluent in Hebrew. I mean, John Boyce, he was proficient in Hebrew as a child. Had read the whole Hebrew Bible by the age of 6. NIV, Saul was 30 years old. 30. It's the NIV. Shouldn't it say 1 year? When he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years. No, it's 1 year and 2 years, not 30 years and 42 years. What? NASB, Saul was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 42 years over. What? No wonder the ESV is just like, oh, let's just not even go there. I don't want to upset anyone, you know. And so, anyway, here's an article that goes over that, and I would recommend for people to read through that. It's a very good article. The guy who writes these articles wants to remain anonymous, but he knows several languages fluently. Very interesting guy. And so I would go through KJV Today website and look at these issues that come up. There's hundreds and hundreds of issues that come up. Sodomite or cult prostitute, you know, and so he's got an article on that. I would go through, read all these. You need to know the other side of the story. Most people who talk about the King James version and talk about, like the things that Melissa was saying, it just seems like that she hasn't looked at the other side. She's been scared off. The King James only thing is a scarecrow term, so you won't look into it, so that you'll just follow these modern Bibles. So History Document says she represents why Satan created the corrupt critical text in the first place to cause confusion. Funny, young people for the past 400 years had no problem understanding or reading the King James Bible. The King James being so-called difficult to read is a modern regurgitated academic talking point and is simply a lie. I was raised in the King James Bible. I started reading the King James Bible when I was 5 years old. I've never had any problems understanding King James. So I understand what you're saying there. Now, when I just interviewed Kirk DeVitro, he said, look, I've read the King James all my life, pretty much the same thing. But he said, look, I have struggled with it. Or he said he understands some people struggle with it. I have seen that too. We've been in Bible studies, and just so happened that someone visiting who's a lawyer, smart guy, he picked up the King James, and he was just like struggling. So we gave him like something like a New King James, and he just read it perfectly. And I've always been like, King James all the way through. But I think the thing is, even D.A. Waite has put, the Defined King James Bible, Trinitarian Bible Society put their edition out with, archaic terminology and things like that. There can be things that are hard to read. Now, if you've been reading it since you're 5, of course, you're going to have an advantage over other people. I don't have a problem with it, but I don't ever say that people who have a problem with it are just lying, because I have seen firsthand, because I've converted many people over to a King James position, and some people go to read it and they're like, man, I'm struggling, with reading it, and it takes a while to get used to it. Now, I basically forced myself to read it. I would play the audio and just read it online with like an online Bible program. And I'd just read through it, and I'd say it out loud as the audio went through. And I'd go through the Bible for like 2 hours a day, just reading like that. So eventually I knew all the vocabulary. I could say it. I'm looking up words, getting the dictionary out. And so, so I would just say that, we've all got our own background and things like that. And there are a lot of people in the world who speak English as a first language, but not to the level of Australia, Canada, America, and England. Like I've been to Papua New Guinea 13 times. I street preach there in English, but they struggle reading a King James. And so there are people around the world. But I would say that this lady, Melissa, what she's saying, because there are people out there who they haven't really even tried that hard, and it's just it's too difficult. I think if she knew all the issues, well, she does seem to know it, but she's saying what James White is saying about it. So she's been indoctrinated, and eventually the indoctrinated they start teaching other people about the false teachings that they've learned, unfortunately. So hopefully someone can lead her out of this type of thing. Victo says, no matter what book you read, you need a dictionary to help with unfamiliar words. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not an advocate for the built-in dictionary, Bible dictionary in the King James. That's a new concept. Victo says, I started reading the King James Bible when I was 8 or 9. There were certain words I didn't understand, but I could grasp the meaning of the verses. Yeah, and I think everyone should read the King James. If you really do struggle, there are TR alternatives out there where you will get the gist of everything, but when you're doing a study, go to the King James. You know what I mean? And so that's for people who struggle. I don't struggle with it. So anyway, let's continue.
Or the New American Standard if you're looking for more of a word-for-word translation. So I hope that this was helpful for you. Again, be sure to check out the description for more resources and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I know so many of you are interested in topics like this, and I need to give a shout out to my seminary, Southern Evangelical.
Okay, so she just gives a bit of a plug for her seminary. So this has had 31,000 views 3 days ago. Lots and lots of comments. People, I love the ESV, love the NIV, King James is hard, and, all this sort of stuff. And yeah, at the end of the day, what do you do with a video like this? Well, I did think I would have time to go through this one, which is her earlier video from 3 years ago. But I think I'll save that for next time, because she does seem to talk about, missing verses and all this stuff. Why so many translations? So I think in a way she's just being a bit vague in this video. Now, I haven't actually watched this video. I was going to sort of do a bit more of a reaction one where it's like, let's just see what she says. I thought I'd go through this in about an hour, and I was going to just jump straight onto this, but there was just so much that she was saying that just needed clarification. And if anyone who has jumped onto this stream because they've seen her face, hopefully they're seeing that, I'm not against this person. I'm not against, I don't really know what else she's saying. Apparently she's got a ministry for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you've got to be saying truth. Now, she's parroting like Wesley Huff's material. As I mentioned, I'll debate Wes Huff on the King James issue. I'll debate him on the Textus Receptus issues. I'll debate James White. I'll debate Dan Wallace. I'll debate anyone on this topic. I'm not afraid of it. Bart Ehrman, anyone, because I'm constantly going through these guys' videos, and what I'm seeing is just a general pattern of misinformation and the just sort of ad hominem attacks. Usually it's like, well, you're a King James only guy. It's a scarecrow term. Don't get involved in King James onlyism, because you'll become a cultist and all this. And so, James White's even TR advocates are now cultists, So basically everyone in the Reformation, if they got in a time machine, came to today, they'd all be cultists. Pretty much everyone, who worked for the Bible Society for like the first, 70, 80 years of the Bible Society would be cultists like me, like TR people like Jeff Riddle and D.A. Wade, and we're cultists now because they've got a new Bible on the block. And not only just one new Bible, but hundreds of new Bibles that all contradict each other, have all these omissions and changes. It's not the same Bible. And she's not saying that, is she? She's not saying, look, there's different underlying Greek texts. She did say, oh, well, there's added words to the King James. It's like, no. Or even, see, the reason why I've even been pulled over the coals for saying there's words omitted, okay? But that's what it says in their margin. These words are omitted in this mention. It says omitted. So that's why I say it. It's not just like I've just got a vendetta and I just, we're first, so we're right, sort of thing. It's like, no, your Bibles say this is omitted. You go through and count the numbers. It says number 3, number 4. It goes to number 6. There's a verse missing. They don't even have the number there. Some of them have a number and they try and squeeze it into the middle of a verse somewhere, and it's like, don't do that. But so I think what I'll do next time, I'll go through this video and explain that. So Victo says, I wasn't raised in a Christian home and I wasn't going to any kind of church at the time. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when I met Joseph Chambers. So he was one of the guys on the Ankerberg show, the 1995 Ankerberg show. It was sort of like a setup. They just had, Sam Gibbs saying a whole bunch of stuff, which a lot of it wasn't really that correct. And, and they were just sort of talking about King James onlyism and just sort of lumping everything together. And it would have been better if they had, people like probably, D.A. Wade and, Kirk DeVitro and, probably the Dean Burgon Society guys. They did have Strauss there, and Strauss, but he's a shy guy. He was just quiet in the back. Joe Chambers, he said a few things, but so anyway, I'm just sort of waffling on. But Joe Chambers said that he became a Christian at 16 and he just started reading the King James. But at the end of the day, my heart is for every culture to have a Textus Receptus Bible that would be akin to the King James. I've been doing some videos about the Korean King James version. We've been working on the Urdu Bible for many years now. We've done a Khmer, Cambodian King James type of Bible, Textus Receptus Bible. Because to me, the King James is basically the Textus Receptus. It's one and the same, sort of thing. A. Hannah says, I believe one of the main problems is that people aren't taught that they can trust the Bible, that it is the Word of God and you can grow thereby, so are left swimming in doubt and every wind of doctrine. When I was first saved, I had a New King James, and I had one that didn't have any marginal notes. I had, like in Daniel 3:25, it had "or son of the gods" there, down the bottom. But I got tired of even those ones, and I scribbled them out with a pen. There wasn't that many, but every now and then, just every 10th page or whatever, it would just have these little things down the bottom. But then I went and got like a full leather proper Christian Bible, I could walk around town with and look like a Christian. And it had all these, in the margin, it had the NU omits this and the M omits this. And I'm thinking, what are these? And so I'd be reading through and getting ministered to by the word, and then it would have a little dot. I'd look over and it would say, these verses do not appear in ancient manuscripts, or the NU omits this. And I'm thinking, what's that? They're taking these words out. And so a lot of people don't know my story who, now if you're a regular to this channel, you probably heard it, but a lot of people don't know my story outside of this channel, where when I was not a Christian, I wasn't born again and just sort of, living a debauched type of life as an atheist. And I saw someone handing out tracts down in Frankston in Melbourne. So I grew up in Melbourne. And so this is in Australia, of course. And so they told me to read the book of James. And so for some reason, I thought it was King James, so I'm like, and I couldn't find the book of James in the Bible. So anyway, someone had given me an NIV Bible somewhere along the way. So I thought, I'm going to read this Bible, because this person just was very kind and nice, and they encouraged me to do that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. So I went home, and I'm looking for this James thing, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And so anyway, I started reading from the beginning. So I read through Matthew 1, 2, 3, and I got to Matthew 5, and it said something like, this verse is not in the original, or it says this other thing. And I was like, these guys don't even know what's supposed to be in and what's supposed to be out. And so I just threw the Bible in the corner of the room and went, what a load of rubbish this is. And so right at the time when my heart's open, I'm reading through the Bible, here comes, this verse shouldn't be in there, that verse shouldn't, all the marginal notes, doubt-producing marginal notes there. And so it wasn't for another year and a half that I actually ended up in a situation with 30 guys trying to kill me. Had a home invasion. I go out the front of my house, there's 30 guys there, and I had an axe, and I had to get the cops involved. It was messy. So that's one of the reasons I moved from that place down in Melbourne. The other people who were involved with what I was involved with, two of them, they moved to Adelaide that night when they went around to their house and put guns in their mouths. Other friend, he moved to Darwin. He split, which was sort of like the other side of Australia. And so I moved, and I become a Christian in the meanwhile. So I prayed to God, and the Spirit of God made me a new person. I become born again. And when I was in year 7, okay. Well, so I just thought I'd tell that story first, because it shows you that as an atheist, I fully knew that these footnotes created doubt. They caused me to doubt that the Bible was real as an atheist. And I can fully understand why people get the Bible and say, this is full of rubbish. This is not legitimate, because that's what I thought. It's like, they don't know which reading is legitimate. And I remember when I was in year 7, I was just, in this high school, and they must have had some sort of Christian group in the high school, because I walked into the gymnasium hall where they play basketball and everything, and they were handing out Bibles from this box to a bunch of kids who were there, so they must have been listening to them. And I was like, oh, what are they handing out? Bibles. And so I said, oh, can you give me, 12? And they said, why do you need so many? And I said, oh, to give them to all my friends, And I went straight home and burnt them. I had no idea what was in the Bible, really. I had really no reason to do that. But I went home and burnt them, because I believe I was driven by demonic spirits. Okay. And so the reason that I'm telling you this is because there is a spirit out there that hates the Bible, and I know that spirit. I used to have those spirits living inside of me. And when I was finally open to looking at the Word of God, I grabbed the NIV, Olympic Bible or whatever someone had given to me. I've grabbed it, started to read it, and it had these doubt-producing footnotes in it. And I'm like, can you imagine going through these, when you go through these sites, and there's so many things that are changed, as I was mentioning before, the King James comparison page. So we'll just go to another one. Let's go to just a random. This is the first commandment. It's deleted. It's just not in these other modern Bibles. Like, I don't think people realize how many things are just changed and deleted. They shall receive greater damnation. Here it says they shall receive a harsher judgment. That's greater damnation. because of me this night. All of you have stumbled because of me this night. Jesus said, all of you will fall away because it's written. So it's changing bits and pieces here and there all the way through the Bible. Look at this one. Just a random one. And the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, he was numbered with the transgressors. I know that's a scripture. My spirit bears witness in me that that's scripture. Omitted. That's why the world is being filled with Bart Ehrmans. The Bibles, the modern Bibles, are causing people to have unbelief. Ahan says, I had a Schofield King James, but never read the notes, but I believed every word of the text. It can be edifying, unlike saying read every translation and compare and make up your own mind. Yeah, it's just a mess. Because here, if you did that here, you just don't have it, and then you have it in here, you just be confused. The Greek text is just completely omitted. And so history document says Maria Martini, or Carlo Maria Martini in your lingo, laying in his deathbed in his Catholic garb is spot on. Yeah, or not lingo, in your intro. Yes. Nick, in your intro, Jesuit Carlo Maria Martini is lying in his Catholic garb. It's spot on. Yes. It's an interesting picture, but it just shows, these people are given over to the Roman Catholic Church and they have influenced the Bible. And so maybe some people don't know about it. Maybe this Melissa lady doesn't know. Let's just look up Carlo Maria Martini. And look, he's famous. He's all over the place. You'd think a guy like this, you go, oh, he's a Roman Catholic guy. Let's jump on here. When I'm saying he's a Jesuit involved with the text, it's not like I'm just reading from Area 51, material. Wikipedia, bold standard Wikipedia. He died in 2012. He was an Italian Jesuit. The Society of Jesus, Ignatius Loyola based, Cardinal of the Catholic Church, and a biblical scholar. Okay. You know what a Jesuit is. Okay. My uncle was a Jesuit. Martini entered the Society of Jesus, life and education, academic career. Look at this. Furthermore, he received the honor of being the only Catholic member of the ecumenical committee that prepared the new Greek edition of the New Testament, the Novum Testamentum Graece. In 1978, under Pope Paul VI, he was nominated to become rector. So he's the only Catholic involved with the Nestle Alarm text. So how prominent was he in that? Let's have a look at some pictures. Images. See, the Jesuits made oaths that they would come against the Protestants, the Papal Pope. Oops. Here. How influential was he? That's him here. Jesuit Carlo Martini. Who's this guy? Bruce Metzger. No, that's Bruce Metzger. This is Kurt Aland. Okay, so it says here, the Committee for the Bible Society's Greek New Testament. From right to left, Carlo Maria Martini. Kurt Aland. Alan Whitgren. Bruce Metzger. Matthew Black. With Klaus Yannick, Aland's assistant. So look at these guys with all the Bibles out there and with the Jesuit working. So this is the Nestle Aland text. So just in case you don't know what that means, let's just go to the ESV Bible. Okay. Maybe ESV Bible Greek text. Crossway. Let's check out Crossway. Okay, well, that's the Tyndale House one. So there's no Bible based upon that yet. Here we are. ESV Greek Bible, Nestle Alarm. So this is the Nestle Alarm text here. This is like an interlinear type of thing. Okay. What text are they working on? The Bible Society's Greek New Testament. And so they're working on the Nestle Alarm text. So where is this? Greek New Testament. Yeah, so we'll go back to this page. It is known as the Nestle Alarm edition. It's currently in its 28th edition. So these guys are working on the Nestle Alarm text. That's what underlies the ESV, the NIV, all of these manuscripts. Oh, sorry, all these translations. I'm getting a bit tired. It's nearly midnight here, so I should shut it down. But anyway, I didn't expect this to go for 3 hours. Got to go, Nick. Take care. Enjoyed. Always some good nuggets. Looking forward to the next stream. I just saw you getting Taylor de Soto on Grace and Peace. Yes, I might show you that before I go. So I'll go to my page. Let's have a look. My channel. Live. And so this is what's happening. For me, this is going to be Saturday morning. But for everyone else in the United States, Eastern Standard Time, so New York time, I guess, this is going to be Friday, May 17th, 2024, 5 o'clock. So that's a bit better for me. So it's about 7 o'clock in the morning rather than 5 o'clock in the morning. It's been too early for all these interviews. So I thought I'd push it back a bit later. Taylor de Soto, he's gold when it comes to this type of thing. I'm really looking forward to interviewing him. Matt Sigwitten's in the house. So thanks for joining us, guys. I'm going to go. I've already just gone for 3 hours. And but we might look at this one. Is every Bible demonic except for the King James? And so we'll look through that. The King James only movement, conspiracy to deceive, missing verses, and why so many translations. So we'll examine that. It mightn't be next time because I still want to go through some of the 1 John 5:7 stuff. I'm still going through the eschatology series. I want to go through Tommy McMurtry's material. But anyway, guys, God bless you. History Documents just said, Nick, remember, a lot of these people you see on YouTube appear to be grassroots, but in reality, they are agency hack working for organizations to undermine the King James Bible. And I would say that, I'm trying to be nice here because I don't know. But yeah, absolutely. Like someone like Huff, he's looking at the same material I am. But he's coming to conclusions that the Westcott and Hort text, Nestle Alarm text is way better. Yet why are they exposing people like us and not Carlo Martini, George Van Smith? Why don't they never even mention these guys? Because they're ashamed to mention them. There's so many skeletons in their closet. It's like, deal with your own problems first, guys. Let people know that you have all these issues. They're just pointing out, Ruckman and Ripplinger said this, and it's like, well, we don't have to be aligned with any other human, but let's turn the mirror around on them. George Van, like, who would you rather preach at your, to your family if you only had one opportunity to preach the gospel to them? Would you rather Peter Ruckman or Gail Ripplinger or Sam Gipp or Carlo Martini? Or George Van Smith, the Unitarian, or the Mormon who's working on the Old Testament? Who would you? So they've got way worse heretics in their camp. So they're projecting to us. So I can listen to the, Ruckman on his bibliology. I might agree or not agree. I'm not involved with a camp. I don't read his text. He's just pointing to the King James and saying, I read that. His conclusions, I can take it or leave it. But see, these guys have a text that's constantly changing and things getting chopped out and added. And it's by these type of people. Who's changing? Who's doing it now? Like Tommy Wasserman doesn't believe in hell. He said that on the Bart Ehrman blog. I don't believe in a literal hell, like fire and stuff. It's Tommy Wasserman, one of the main guys. Who are these people? It's heretical. So anyway, God bless you guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. And I just want to say I really appreciate you guys commenting as I'm going along here, because it sort of keeps me focused. And I know sometimes I disagree, with some people, and I just say it out, I disagree with this and that. And I'm only just going by my personal experience as well. Everyone has their own experience. Some people have their whole life is saturated with the King James. Other people don't and haven't had that. And like here in Australia, the whole King James issue is like, you're from Mars. But I know in some places in America it's like that too. In other places it's like every minister has a King James because they know these issues. But anyway, God bless you guys. We'll see you next time.